Gerald Whitmore thought the building's marble lobby was impenetrable until an 8-year-old girl in yellow rain boots marched across it, pressed a lavender-scented letter into his hand, and said, "My grandma is running out of time. I heard you fix impossible things. In the next 10 minutes, Gerald will discover that money can't buy what this child truly needs, but his heart just might." Gerald Whitmore began every Monday with the same unbending choreography. At 6 o'clock a.m. sharp, the curtains in his penthouse lifted at the touch of an automated timer, revealing a skyline still yawning into pale pink. He swung his legs over Egyptian cotton sheets, let his slippers find the heated oak floor, and padded toward the espresso machine that hissed before he even spoke a word. 10 minutes later, he was dressed in a slate gray suit precisely tailored to hide the subtle stoop that had crept into his shoulders after 73 years of standing at the top of the world. The private elevator carried him 40 stories down to the lobby of Whitmore Investments, a cathedral of marble and frosted glass he decommissioned long after he'd stopped needing more money. Somewhere along the way, the building had become his fortress, a place where everything looked polished, precise, and entirely under control. The young associates who arrived early did so with the reverence of whoreboys, nodding but never lingering, as though any delay in Gerald's path might shatter the illusion that life could still be managed with spreadsheets. He liked it that way. Order kept the past quiet. At 7:10 a.m., he stood for a moment beneath the immense chandelier, checking his pocket watch, an heirloom that had outlived everyone who'd ever called him son, brother, or husband. Then he marched toward the private hallway leading to his office. The building was all but silent except for the rhythmic click of his cane against stone, a sound as familiar to his staff as the opening bell of the stock exchange. What Gerald did not know, could not have known, was that a storm in a yellow raincoat had slipped through the revolving doors, a heartbeat behind him. The child's name was Lily Harper, 8 years old, freckled nose, tangled hair that suggested a rushed braid undone by wind. She wore boots splattered with mud that did not belong anywhere near marble floors, and she carried a paper envelope sealed with lavender wax. That wax was already cracking along the edges, as though the letter inside had been folded and unfolded 100 times in anxious little hands. Marcus, the security guard posted at reception, noticed her first. "Sweetheart, you lost?" he asked, softening his usual bass voice. He'd been trained to spot threats, not third graders. Lily shook her head with the conviction of someone who had practiced this moment over cereal and resolve. "No, sir, I am exactly where I need to be." Her diction surprised him, but not as much as her next move. She marched straight past the velvet ropes, straight past the fountain Gerald had imported from Verona, and headed directly for the private corridor, boots squeaking with each determined step. Marcus started after her, but she raised the letter above her head like a tiny traffic sign. "I have an appointment," she declared, "with Mr. Whitmore." Marcus hesitated. The lobby cameras were rolling, and the child looked neither frightened nor mischievous, just focused in a way that reminded him of his own granddaughter insisting on bedtime stories. Still, protocol was protocol. He pressed a discreet button. Far above, on the 39th floor, Gerald's personal assistant, Elaine Murphy, glanced at the flashing icon on her console and sighed. Crisis before coffee. Elaine stepped into the elevator, smoothing the sleeves of her mid-green blazer as she descended. By the time she reached the lobby, Lily was standing inches from the frosted glass doors that marked authorized personnel only. Marcus stood beside her like an uneasy shepherd. "What seems to be the trouble?" Elaine asked, attempting a smile that was professional but kind. Lily held out the envelope. "My grandma said Mr. Whitmore fixes impossible things, and she's running out of time." Elaine took the envelope, felt the raised wax pressed with the delicate imprint of a flower lavender, matching the scent that curled from the paper. She could see the girl's hands tremble ever so slightly, despite the bravado. "What is your name, honey?" "Lily Harper." "And your grandmother?" "Margaret Harper. She's in Rosewood Hospice, room 18, but they want to move her to extended care. We can pay." The words fell out in rehearsed cadence, but her eyes flickered as though the reality behind them still stung. Elena's professional clock kept ticking. 7:16 a.m. Gerald liked his briefings at 7:30 sharp. Any variation rippled through the day like a fault line, but something in Lily's posture, chin lifted, shoulders squared against fear, made Elaine pause. She remembered her own grandmother humming Patsy Cline while braiding her hair. The old woman had passed when Elaine was 9. No amount of executive training eased that kind of ache. "Let me see what I can do," she said. Lily's boots squeaked once as she shifted weight. "Thank you, ma'am, but please hurry. Grandma doesn't like being alone long." Elaine rapped on Gerald's door at 7:28, 2 minutes early yet somehow feeling late. Inside, the office overlooked the river like a monarch surveying loyal waters. Gerald sat behind a desk of black walnut, too grand for modern taste, reviewing market forecasts. He did not glance up. "Your morning brief, Mr. Whitmore." "Set it there." His voice was mild steel. Elaine did as told but remained standing. Unusual, Gerald noticed, finally lifting his eyes. Something else. She placed Lily's envelope atop the printed reports. The lavender scent reached him before the color did. It dragged a memory from decades earlier. Gerald's late wife, Evelyn, used to line dresser drawers with lavender sahets. The sudden recollection made him still. What is this? A personal plea from a child in the lobby. Says her grandmother is at Rosewood Hospice. Elaine kept her tone neutral, but her eyes flickered with unspoken hope that he might, just this once, be the man the newspapers still pretended he was. Gerald turned the envelope in his hands. Wax floral stamp, shaky script to Mr. Gerald Whitmore, fixer of impossible things. His brow furrowed. Public relations stunts occasionally found their way to him, but this felt nothing like the smug proposals of would-be entrepreneurs. He broke the seal. Dear Mr. Whitmore, my grandma is the best person I know. She taught me how to grow tomatoes on the fire escape and how to read stories out loud with voices so even the curtains clap. But her heart is tired. Doctors say medicine costs too much. She doesn't want to scare me, but I can tell by the way she holds my hand that she is afraid of leaving. I heard from Nurse Alma that you built most of the city and that money listens when you talk. Could you please make it listen for Grandma? I can pay you back by polishing your big shiny floors or organizing the lobby magazines. I don't miss school much since they moved us near the hospice, but I am good at math and promise I won't break anything. Thank you for reading. Please come fast. She coughs more at night. Sincerely, Lily Harper, age 834. P.S. Grandma likes lavender. It reminds her of home. That's why the letter smells like it, so you will think of her whenever you read it. Gerald finished, then laid the paper flat as though afraid a careless fold might injure the words. He noticed his hand trembling, maddening, because he kept steady through boardroom meltdowns and billion-dollar gambles. A child's ink was undoing him. Security confirmed the girl is still downstairs? He asked quietly. Elaine nodded. Yes, sir. Gerald closed his eyes, let out a breath. Docklands, 1954. He was 10, holding his mother's hand outside a charity clinic, listening to an answer they couldn't afford. Memory cracked open like old paint. He stood so abruptly the chair protested. Turn on the car, and have Marcus escort the girl to the private foyer. Elaine's relief was small but visible, right away. Within minutes, Gerald stood at the threshold of the lobby again, this time not as monarch but as question mark. Lily waited near the side entrance, boots leaving faint muddy crescents on white marble that would have horrified him yesterday. Today he barely noticed. She sized him up with unabashed scrutiny, like a mechanic appraising a vintage engine. You're older than the picture on your building, she pronounced. Gerald almost laughed. The sound emerged as a dusty cough of amusement. Time is rude that way. She extended a hand, small but firm. I am Lily. Did you read the letter? I did. He clasped her hand gently. Lavender is a nice touch. Grandma's idea, said important men forget things unless they smell nice. Lily's voice wavered on the last syllable, betraying fear. She swallowed it down. Gerald motioned toward the revolving doors. Let us go see her, shall we? Marcus opened the door as though for diplomats. Outside, a drizzle painted the city in silver streaks. Gerald's driver, Thomas, stood by the rear door of a sleek black town car, confusion flickering across his calm demeanor when he saw the child beside his employer. Gerald helped Lily climb in first, then followed, cane resting across his knees. The leather seats dwarfed Lily. She held her backpack, a faded canvas thing decorated with marker hearts like a life vest. Gerald caught her staring at the miniature clock embedded in the armrest. You like watches? He asked. My grandpa collected pocket watches, she replied. He said every tick is a promise you're still here. Gerald touched the silver timepiece in his vest pocket, stunned by coincidence. Before he could probe, Lily whispered, Do hospitals scare you? Not anymore, he answered, though the lie sat awkwardly on his tongue. They used to. Me too, but Grandma's courage is being scared and doing it anyway. Their eyes met hers with childlike certainty, his with a question life had stopped asking. Could he still be brave? The drive to Rosewood Hospice wound through neighborhoods Gerald rarely visited. Rain clouded the windows, blurring storefronts into impressionist scenes, laundromats, bakeries, second-hand shops where love outlived profit. Lily named each passing block. That is where we got Grandma's favorite tea. Those steps are slippery when it snows. She narrated her life with a tour guide's devotion, gifting Gerald with details he didn't deserve yet couldn't refuse. At last they turned onto Hawthorne Street. Rosewood Hospice sat behind iron gates tangled with dormant roses. The building was modest, red brick softened by ivy. Gerald felt his chest tighten. He had funded wings of major hospitals, yet never stepped inside this place. Thomas parked. Lily hopped out, boots splashing a puddle that kissed Gerald's trousers. He didn't flinch. She grabbed his hand without asking, pulling him toward the entrance. Her palm was cold and tremoring. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and sage tea, a strange but gentle pairing. A receptionist looked up, startled at the sight of Gerald Whitmore in her shabby foyer. Lily flashed her gap-toothed smile. We were here for room 18. The walk down the corridor was lined with paintings done by patient sunflowers, sailboats, crooked cottages under giant moons. Gerald's step slowed, drinking in stories without words. Lily tugged him forward. Room 18's door was ajar, soft beeping from a heart monitor kept time. Margaret Harper lay propped by pillows, white hair braided loosely, skin translucent as candle wax. Yet her expression, even in sleep, was peaceful like someone recalling a favorite hymn. "Grandma," Lily whispered, setting her backpack on the chair. Margaret's eyelids fluttered, she turned, eyes adjusting, and faintly smiled. "Lily Bean, you made it before the rain stopped." Her voice was airy, but warmth threaded through. "I brought someone," Lily announced. "Mr. Whitmore, the fixer." Margaret focused on Gerald. Recognition sparked though they had never met. His name was legend in city papers. She attempted to sit straighter. The effort drew a shallow sigh. Gerald approached, suddenly aware of every misstep of his life. He removed his hat. "Mrs. Harper, thank you for seeing me." She chuckled, a soft rustle. "Can't you imagine I had much choice? Lily negotiates with angels the same way." Lily climbed onto the bed's edge, careful of tubes. She laid the lavender-scented letter on the blanket. A ceremonial gesture. He read it. Margaret touched her granddaughter's cheek. "That is all we can ask, child." Her gaze drifted to Gerald. "I imagine you were busy. Sir, why come for an old lady's goodbye?" Gerald swallowed. "I was asked politely, and because fixing impossible things might be the only worthwhile job left for me." Margaret's eyes softened. "Then sit, share the impossible." He pulled a chair closer, cane across lap, and listened as Margaret detailed her condition: heart failure complicated by lung scarring. Insurance covered palliative care but not the experimental treatment, offering a slim window of recovery. Gerald asked questions like the businessman he was. Margaret answered with stoic clarity, Lily hymning in when her grandmother's breath ran short. Finally, Gerald said, "Would you permit my physicians to review your file?" Margaret looked at Lily, who squeezed her hand. "If it eases my granddaughter's worry, then yes, but promise me one thing." "Anything." Dante promise what life can deliver. Hope is precious, and children spend it too easily. Gerald nodded, throat tight. "I promise only to try with every resource I have." Margaret closed her eyes briefly, as though granting permission to fate itself. When she opened them, moisture glimmered. "And I accept your kindness. And your risk." Lily exhaled a sound like a small bird finally settling in its nest. She rummaged in her backpack, producing 2 withered packets of lavender seeds. "For when Grandma comes home, we'll plant them." Gerald took one packet between thumb and forefinger. The paper was thin, edges soft from handling. He imagined soil beneath fingernails, the humble humility of kneeling by a flower bed, and wondered when he'd last felt that honest dirt. A nurse entered to check vitals, startled at the visitor but continuing her duties with professional grace. Gerald stepped aside, observing the gentle efficiency with which she recorded numbers that carried life's weight in digits. For a man who trafficked in numbers daily, these felt heavier than any portfolio. When the nurse finished, Lily asked if she could read aloud. From her backpack she retrieved Anne of Green Gables, pages dog-eared and water-spotted. She began softly, voice wobbling on big words but persevering. Gerald listened, hypnotized. The corridor's hum receded, leaving only Lily's earnest narration and the steady beep, one counting stories, the other counting seconds. Half an hour passed. Lily's voice frayed. Gerald offered to take over. She handed the book, eyes grateful. He cleared his throat, finding the placed paragraph about kindred spirits beneath apple blossoms in red. His baritone, once reserved for earning billions, wrapped itself around Montgomery's prose like a grandfather's quilt. Margaret smiled, lids drooping. Lily leaned against Gerald's arm, lulled by rhythm. In that moment he was not a titan, she was not a fearful child. Margaret not a dying patient. They were simply 3 souls sharing a story. When the chapter ended, silence settled like fresh snow. Lily sat up. "We should let Grandma rest." Gerald agreed. He stood, knees creaking, and shook Margaret's hand, a gesture that felt insufficient yet sacred. Outside the room, Lily tugged his sleeve. "Thank you," she whispered. "Even if nothing changes today, felt better." He crouched awkwardly, cane supporting. "Things will change. I don't know how yet, but they will." Her eyes searched his, as though weighing truth on invisible scales. She nodded, satisfied. The drive back was quieter. Lily dozed, head against the window. Gerald watched raindrops race down glass, each a tiny world shifting course. At headquarters, he carried Lily across the lobby to meet her aunt, who arrived breathless from work. Papers were exchanged, gratitude offered, logistics arranged. But Gerald's mind was already elsewhere. He ascended to his office, closed the door, and stared at city lights kindling through thinning clouds. On his desk lay the letter, lavender still whispering from its fibers. Beside it he placed the seed packet. At 9:47 a.m., while traders shouted across exchanges he no longer visited, Gerald Whitmore dialed his foundation director. "I need a full review of Rosewood Hospice funding, and I want Dr. Alvarez from Heartio Innovations to consult on a case today." The director began to protest scheduling conflicts. Gerald's voice, though quiet, brooked no debate. "Make time. A clock is ticking and promises are being kept." After the call ended, he stood at the window until the glass mirrored back a version of himself he barely recognized, eyes bright with purpose. Posture less stooped. Somewhere behind him Elaine cleared her throat. Sir, the quarterly board call is waiting. Reschedule, he said without turning. I have something more important. Elaine did not argue. In her peripheral vision she noticed the seed packet on the desk, already promising a season that hadn't yet arrived. Gerald touched his pocket watch. Each tick sounded louder now, like little lavender-scented promises. And for the first time in years, Monday morning felt less like a cage and more like the first page of a story worth telling. He sank into his chair, opened a blank notepad, and wrote one line in steady hand. Fix the impossible. Below it, he underlined the word impossible 3 times, dark, unbroken strokes that cut through doubt the way a child's faith had cut through fortress walls of marble and routine. Outside, the rain stopped, the city exhaled, and somewhere on a hospice pillow, lavender dreams drifted over a fragile heart finally dared to hope again. Gerald Whitmore normally spent Tuesday mornings sign-offing spreadsheets, but at 7:05 a.m., he was already in the back seat of his town car, a legal pad resting on his knees and a single phrase boxed at the top: Operation Lavender. Thomas eased the car through light traffic while the city tried to decide whether it wanted to rain again. Gerald barely noticed. He had not slept more than 3 hours, choosing instead to read every article he could find on congestive heart failure therapies for patients over 70. He did not understand half the medical jargon, so he filled the margins with questions if OVAD versus TA, cost curve. He felt oddly alive, confused, restless, but alive like a man who had wandered into a foreign market and discovered none of the currencies in his wallet mattered anymore. His first stop was Whitmore Foundation headquarters, a smaller, quieter annex 3 blocks from the investment tower. The staff there were used to dispersing predictable philanthropy, arts endowments, scholarship funds, public park benches with shiny plaques. That morning, they met a tornado in a tailored suit. Gerald strode into the glass conference room, cane tapping with impatient rhythm. I need an emergency grant drafted in the next 2 hours, he announced to the startled faces of program officers nursing their first coffees. Primary beneficiary Rosewood Hospice, secondary Cardio Innovations Research Group for Pilot Treatment Access. A young grants manager, Manny Charles, mid-30s, impeccably organized, blinked twice, clicked her pen, and said, Mr. Whitmore, we normally require a 30-day review for medical allocations. Today you all require 90 minutes. His tone wanted cruel. Just absolute, the way gravity is absolute. Manny's eyes darted to the others, then back to Gerald. Something in his expression told her this was not a drill. She opened her laptop. We'll need patient ID, diagnosis codes, financial statements. I'll obtain them, he said, and schedule a courier to pick up signed paperwork from Rosewood before noon. Manny nodded, fingers already dancing across keys. Deadlines thrilled her, impossible ones terrified her. Perhaps both sensations could coexist. Gerald turned to leave, then paused, and Ms. Charles itemized a discretionary line for facility improvements. The roof leaks near the west wing. She hadn't mentioned the roof. No one in that room had ever set foot in Rosewood. Gerald's observation carried the weight of witness. It galvanized them more than any pep talk could. Outside, Thomas pulled the car curbside again, but Gerald waved him off. Hold the engine. I am walking the next block. It was a small rebellion against routine, but the air tasted different when you owned fewer minutes and cared more about each of them. He walked briskly, cane striking pavement, and noticed things he usually missed: a bakery's warm sugar smell, the click of a shutter as a tourist photographed street art, the way clouds parted just enough to send a thin shaft of light across the pavement like a spotlight guiding his path. Elaine waited at the investment tower side entrance, holding a file thick enough to choke a briefcase. Hospital records faxed over an hour ago, she said. Dr. Celia Alvarez expects us at 9 sharp. Gerald checked his pocket watch. 8, well, plenty of time. Elaine fell into step beside him, heels clipping. You haven't rescheduled the quarterly call. The board is worried the sky will fall. He offered a faint smile. Tell them it already did. And we rebuilding umbrellas. Elaine nearly laughed. The sound came out as a startled breath. Gerald seldom used metaphors. Back in the car, he skimmed the file. Margaret Harper, age 78. Retired elementary school librarian, widowed, primary caregiver to minor grandchild, not eligible for transplant due to age, but a candidate for an emerging procedure, an implantable biopolymer sleeve designed to assist left ventral contraction. Trial success rate 52%, cost prohibitive. He underlined the success rate twice, whispering, 52 is better than 0. At 8:54 they arrived at Cardio Innovations, a sleek complex of steel and solar panels on the Medio Research campus. Inside, white walls glowed with soft blue lids, as if the building itself practiced deep breathing. Dr. Celia Alvarez met them in the atrium, lab coat flaring like a captain's jacket. She extended a hand. Mr. Whitmore, you earlier than most moguls. Spanish accent lilted beneath flawless English. Early's cheaper than regret, he replied. Dr. Alvarez raised an eyebrow, intrigued, and led them to a small conference room where a 3D model of a human heart rotated in holographic silence. She tapped a tablet, freezing the heart mid-beat, and highlighted the left ventricle in neon yellow. Mrs. Harper's ventricular wall is thinning, she explained. Our Becca sleeve supports contraction while stimulating tissue regeneration. Trial stage 2 begins next month, but we can petition for a compassionate use waiver. Timeline? Gerald asked. Review board in 7 days, implantation within 14 if approved. She'll need preoperative stabilization. Gerald glanced at Elaine. The hospice is equipped for that? Barely, Elaine admitted. Rosewood relies on drip maids and 2 portable oxygen concentrators. They do need a cardiac monitor upgrade. Dr. Alvarez folded her arms. I could arrange interim transfer to Memorial. But Mrs. Harper's emotional stability is key. Separation from her granddaughter could elevate stress hormones. So we bring the necessary equipment to Rosewood, Gerald concluded. Cost? Rental and install roughly $45,000. He nodded as if she had quoted the price of lunch. I'll wire funds by noon. Dr. Alvarez studied him. Most donors ask for press releases. I am not most donors. No, she said softly. I gather not. Elaine's phone buzzed. She stepped aside, mouth foundation to Gerald, and answered. After a moment she covered the mic. Money needs Mrs. Harper's signature on consent forms to expedite the grant. Gerald turned to Dr. Alvarez. We're heading back to Rosewood. I'll meet you there, she said, pulling off her coat to trade for a travel jacket hanging by the door. And I'll bring a portable sono kit for an on-site assessment. Gerald offered his hand again. Thank you, doctor. She shook it firmly. Thanked the girl. Her letter landed on the right desk. What letter? Your assistant sent me a scan at 6 o'clock a.m. A reminder of why we choose hard work over easy glory. She smiled, then strode down the hall, already dictating orders to her resident via headset. Back in the car, Gerald felt something unusual, a flutter not unlike fear, but warmer, anticipation perhaps. He turned to Elaine. Did you send that letter to everyone? Just the doctor and the foundation. Seemed to say more than any executive summary I could draft. He chuckled. That child is a better pitch writer than half the consultants I've hired. Elaine allowed herself a grin. At a tenth of the fee. They arrived at Rosewood Hospice just after 10. The drizzle had faded, leaving the air smelling of damp earth and diesel from a nearby delivery truck. Inside, Lily was in the common room, coloring butterflies on scrap paper while a volunteer played old standards on an out-of-tune piano. When she saw Gerald, she sprang up, yellow boots squeaking against linoleum. You came back. Her voice was equal parts surprise and certainty. I said I would, Gerald replied, noting how his heart lifted at her smile. He crouched, joints protesting. We brought someone else too. Dr. Alvarez entered, wheeling a slim battery-powered ultrasound unit. Lily's eyes widened. Whoa, that looks like Redutu's cousin. The doctor laughed. Close enough. I hear you regarding the most important patient in the building. Lily stood taller. Grandma is resting, but she likes company. They walked toward room 18. Nurses paused mid-task, whispering at the entourage. In the doorway, Lily smoothed her dress, a blue one today, with a frayed hem, and whispered, Grandma guests. Margaret opened her eyes, weaker than yesterday but sparkling with gentle mischief. You brought half the hospital to me, she rasped. Just the smart half, Gerald said, pulling a chair close. Dr. Alvarez introduced herself, then began the ultrasound, narrating each step so Lily could understand. The monitor displayed pulses of color, reds and blues streaming like tiny weather maps through Margaret's heart. Lily leaned over the bed rail, mesmerized. See that blue swirl? The doctor said. That's blood returning to the lungs. We want it strong but not leaking. Lily nodded solemnly, as if accepting a mission from headquarters. Margaret watched Gerald watching her. You haven't slept, she murmured. Sleep can wait, he replied. Not forever, she warned, a hint of teacher's sternness in her fading voice. Gerald smiled. I hired coffee. Dr. Alvarez finished scanning and excused herself to consult with the charge nurse. Gerald signed a stack of preliminary authorizations Elaine had prepared. Lily fetched crayons to label each form with tiny lavender flowers. Announcing, makes the paperwork friendlier. Even Margaret wheezed a laugh. When formalities paused, Gerald invited Lily to the cafeteria for cocoa. She hesitated, eyes on her grandmother. We'll be 10 minutes, Margaret assured. Bring me a lemon cookie if they have one. Lily grinned. Yes, ma'am. The cafeteria was little more than 3 vending machines and a microwave. Gerald frowned, already making mental notes for renovation. He purchased 2 hot cocoas from a battered dispenser. The machine sputtered but delivered. They sat at a small corner table, Lily's feet swinging. Is Grandma very sick today? She asked. She is sick, yes, but we were giving her a fighting chance. Gerald folded his hands. My doctors want to try something new, something hopeful. Will it hurt her? She might feel sore after surgery, but it could help her breathe easier and stay longer. Longer matters, right? Lily's eyes brightened then clouded. What if longer isn't tea forever? Gerald exhaled. Then we fill the time with every good thing we can think of. Stories, gardens, lemon cookies. Lily swirled her cocoa. Grandma says forever is just more chances to love people. So if you keep loving after someone has gone, forever still happens. He stared into his cup, steam fogging his glasses. That's very wise. She has had more practice. Lily smiled, gap-toothed and earnest. When they returned to room 18, Dr. Alvarez was reviewing vitals. Mrs. Harper, your numbers qualify for the Compassionate Use program, she announced. We'll submit the waiver today. Margaret squeezed Lily's hand. We follow the current where it leads. Gerald's phone buzzed, a text from Imani grant paperwork ready for signature. He typed back, deliver here. Also arrange roof repair estimate. Margaret observed the exchange. Moving heaven and earth? Just adjusting the roof so it doesn't fall on us, he replied. Roof metaphors today, Elaine muttered, scribbling notes. Over the next 2 hours, hospice quarters became command centers, electricians soaked outlets for the new monitor. The maintenance chief debated generator capacity. A courier arrived with consent forms which Margaret signed in looping script. Pausing to rest between pages, Lily dotted each I with a tiny heart. No one objected. At one point Gerald noticed a silver-haired woman peeking into the room. Tears brimming, she introduced herself as Mrs. Brandt, bedridden in room 22. I just wanted to say your girl reads aloud every evening. Even when my pain keeps me awake, she dabbed her eyes. She has sunshine. Gerald thanked her. Lily hopped over and hugged the stranger's waist without fear. The gesture punched Gerald straight in the chest, a reminder of how freely children give what adults withhold. By mid-afternoon, Rosewood's modest courtyard was buzzing. Gerald had arranged for a landscaping crew to trim hedges and clear debris. Lily begged to help. They gave her gloves far too big, which she wore proudly, hauling tiny branches to a compost bin while humming an off-key tune. Gerald watched from a shaded bench, Elaine beside him with a tablet managing cascading emails. You've postponed 3 major meetings, she said quietly. Reschedule again. Shareholders will ask why. Tell them I am diversifying into humanity. Elaine shook her head, half amused, half amazed. I've never seen you like this. Neither have I. He leaned forward, elbows on cane. Elaine, do you believe people can rewrite their legacy this late in the book? She considered. History remembers the last chapter more vividly than the first. He nodded, eyes tracking Lily's yellow boots stomping clumps of ivy. Then let us make the last chapters sing. As dusk approached, Dr. Alvarez returned with good news. Provisional approval looked likely. The review board valued the foundation's willingness to underwrite expenses. Surgery date tentatively set for 2 weeks, pending stabilization. Margaret whispered a grateful prayer. Lily spun once in the hallway, then dashed off to find more paper for thank you cards. Gerald stood next to Dr. Alvarez, both watching the little whirl of energy. Children survive on hope, the doctor said. And hope survives on children, Gerald replied. Dr. Alvarez smiled. You know, if more donors came in person, medicine would move faster. He tapped his cane. Donors are allergic to vulnerability. Being here reminds us money can't guarantee outcomes. But it can buy time, she countered. Time and lavender, he added, earning a puzzled look. He chuckled. Long story. Night settled softly. Elaine left to coordinate corporate chaos. Dr. Alvarez returned to the lab. Gerald chose to stay, claiming the recliner in Margaret's room. Nurses offered him a spare blanket. He declined, preferring to keep watch. Lily fell asleep in a chair, head lolling against his arm. He dared not move. Margaret opened her eyes, studying the scene. You remind me of my late husband, she murmured. Gerald smiled, flattered. He believed if you listen hard enough, you can hear a person's heartbeat without a stethoscope just by paying attention. Gerald met her gaze, steady. What does mine say? She tilted her head, as though hearing something distant yet clear. It says you were lonely before Lavender Ink forced the door open. He didn't deny it, only whispered, and now? Still lonely sometimes, but now the door stays ajar. Silence settled between them, comfortable as wool. Margaret closed her eyes again, breathing slowly, trusting the room to hold her. Gerald watched her chest rise, fall, rise. Each cycle felt like a clock resetting its promise. He looked down at Lily as small fingers curled around his sleeve and realized he was holding 2 lifelines, one frail, one new, both equally sacred. He thought of the marble lobby, its echoing emptiness. Tomorrow he would walk through it changed, carrying the scent of lavender, the sound of Lily's laughter, the hum of a fragile heart still beating. He would remember that marble, no matter how polished, could never feel as alive as this dimly lit hospice room. Wallets by luxury, stories by purpose. Somewhere in the gap between those, he had found a reason to stay awake. At 11:43 p.m., Gerald finally drifted off, head resting back against the recliner. For the first time in years he did not dream of numbers or regrets. He dreamed of a garden, one he had yet to plant, where lavender grew tall. And somewhere beyond the blossoms, a child's laughter braided itself with the breeze. When the night nurse checked in, she saw them: the sleeping billionaire, the dozing child, and the patient whose monitors chirped steady reassurance. She smiled, dimmed the lights, and pulled the door nearly closed, leaving a sliver so that the moonlight could find its way to the lavender letter resting on the bedside table. Outside, the repaired courtyard fountain splashed gently for the first time in months, its water catching moonbeams like silver threads stitching tomorrow to today. Gerald didn't hear it, but somehow he felt it, and his heartbeat answered back. Not in Morse code of worry but in a simple, unbroken rhythm: keep going, keep going. Lavender had become lifeline, and everyone in room 18 held tight. Morning drizzled a pale veil over the city, softening the sharp angles of glass towers and muting the horns that normally blared like restless birds. Gerald Whitmore stood by the curb outside his building, cane planted, pocket watch ticking louder than crush hour traffic. It was 6:55 a.m., 5 minutes ahead of the schedule he'd drafted during the night. Operation Lavender had reached day 3, and today held a new variable. Lily would make the daily trek from the small apartment she shared with her Aunt Grace to Rosewood Hospice. Only this time, Gerald intended to escort her personally. The plan seemed simple when he scribbled it at 2 o'clock a.m. Pick up Lily, ride together, deliver breakfast to Margaret, review stabilization labs, and finalize equipment installs. Simple on paper, messy in real life, he quickly discovered. Thomas idled the town car while Gerald scanned the sidewalk, his eyes, sharper now that purpose had replaced apathy, tracked a city bus groaning to a halt at the corner. The door folded back with a sigh, and a flash of yellow boot materialized among morning commuters. Lily hopped down, a sunflower-printed umbrella wobbling above her braid. Her Aunt Grace followed, clutching a tote bag that had definitely seen better years. Aunt Grace spotted Gerald first, an expensive statue among puddles, and nudged her nice. Lily's grin erupted like sunrise after a power outage. She raced forward, splashing water that leapt theatrically against granite curbing. "You came," she shouted, umbrella spinning in her hand like a helix. Gerald's heart tugged, unfamiliar but welcome. A promise is a promise. Grace arrived a step behind, breathless. "Mr. Whitmore, good morning. I hope this isn't tea out of your way." "On the contrary," he replied, gesturing toward the car. "You re my first priority." Thomas opened the rear door. Grace hesitated, eyeing leather seats that probably cost more than her annual take-home. Gerald caught the hesitation. "I assure you it is clean," he said. "I spilled espresso in it once. The car forgave me." Grace laughed, a short sound, but genuine, and ushered Lily inside before climbing after her. When they were buckled, Thomas merged into traffic, windshield wipers swatting fine mist. Lily twisted in her seat, face bright. "Did you bring the pocket watch?" Gerald retrieved it from his vest. "Never leave home without my punctual companion." "Can I hold it until we get there?" she asked, palms raised. He hesitated. The watch had belonged to his father, the only inheritance that hadn't been leveraged for seed capital decades ago. Handing it to anyone had always felt like surrendering pulse control. But Lily's eyes contained neither greed nor carelessness, only reverence. He placed the watch in her hands. She traced the engraving on the back. G.W. 1912. "Grandma says every tick is another yes from the universe," she whispered. Grace looked out the window to hide tears that threatened. Gerald pretended not to notice but felt his chest ache. The route to Rosewood wound through neighborhoods still in pajamas, bakeries opening shutters, kids dragging backpacks, an elderly man setting plastic flamingos in a postage-stamp lawn. Lily narrated everything. "We get empanadas there on Sunday. That playground has slide squeaks like a duck. That mural has a secret heart behind the blue paint, my friend Mateo told me." Gerald had traveled these streets for board meetings, charity galas, groundbreakings, yet he'd never seen them until Lily added subtitles only a child could provide. Traffic snarled near a construction site. Thomas signaled frustration only by adjusting radio volume lower. From the seat pocket, Gerald produced a folder stamped Whitmore Foundation Confidential. Inside lay Rosewood's preliminary renovation plans: new roof, HVA upgrade, garden redesign. He flipped pages so Grace could see. "I am overhauling the facility," he said quietly. "No one should fight for breath under a leaking ceiling." Grace placed a hand over her mouth. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll all supervise the color palettes," he teased. "I am told my taste in paint skews corporate. I once renovated Grandma's pantry with 4 shades of white because I couldn't decide." Grace admitted. "So maybe we get Lily to choose." Lily perked. "Cement green like beach glass." "Noted," Gerald said, scribbling on the blueprint margin. As the car inched forward, Lily opened the watch to her ear. "Mr. Whitmore, how old were you when someone first asked you for help?" The question struck like accidental truth. He gazed at the drizzle sliding down glass. "You re the first person to ask me this way. But you re super rich. People must ask all the time. They ask for money." He met her eyes. "Not for help. There's a difference." Lily seemed to digest that, then nodded. "Money is paper, help is hands." Grace exhaled, half laugh, half sigh. "She has been saying fortune cookie things since kindergarten." Gerald smiled. "World could use more fortune cookies." The jam eased, and soon Rosewood's red brick peeked through wisteria vines. But before Thomas could turn into the lot, Gerald spotted a commotion: 2 ambulances, lights spinning but sirens silent, and a white van marked County Health Department. A man in a navy blazer gestured briskly to hospice staff. Tension rippled across the parking area like static. Gerald's stomach clenched. "Thomas, pull up by the main entrance." Lily sensed the shift. The pocket watch ticked faster against her palm, or maybe her pulse quickened. Grace squeezed her shoulder. The trio exited the car. Rain had stopped, humidity hugged them like damp wool. Gerald approached a nurse he recognized, Janice, curly hair escaping a bun. Her face was pinched with worry. "What is happening?" Gerald asked. "State inspection," she whispered, eyes darting to the blazer. "They reciting us for outdated monitoring systems. Could shut us down if we don't comply within 30 days. Gerald's jaw tightened. Not today. He marched toward the inspector, cane clicking authority. Lily and Grace trailed like determined ducklings. The man noticed Gerald's approach. "Morning. I am Director Wallace. County Health." His handshake was perfunctory. "Who might you be?" "Benefactor," Gerald replied. "We were already replacing the monitors." Wallace consulted a tablet. "No record of approved purchase orders. They'll arrive before your paperwork finishes digitizing." Gerald's voice cooled several degrees. "In the meantime, patients need stability, not displacement." Wallace crossed arms. "Good intentions don't override regulations. Unless the new units are in place, we initiate transfer protocols for high-risk cases." Gerald set his cane and tapped the asphalt, mind calculating. Transfer would move Margaret to a long-term county facility miles away. 1 visitor per day, no private rooms, crushing the fragile progress they'd fought for. He took a breath. "How long before your report files?" "System uploads at midnight." "Then give me 9 hours." Wallace smirked. 9 hours to source, deliver, and install cardiac monitors? 8, actually. Gerald checked the watch still in Lily's hand. Then met Wallace's gaze. "We've wasted one." The inspector studied him, perhaps recognizing the surname. He shrugged. "Fine. Midnight, but no extensions." He signaled his team into the van and drove off. Grace blew out air. 8 hours. Gerald turned to Janice. "How many units?" 4 multiparameter monitors, 2 infant-compatible modules, plus battery backups. "Elaine will know vendors," Gerald muttered, already speed dialing. Signal inside the hospice lobby was weak, so he stepped out, leaving Lily and Grace with Janice. Inside, Lily sprinted to room 18. Margaret was propped higher today, hair brushed into a neat bun by a volunteer. She smiled as Lily bounded in. "Grandma, guess what? We rebeating a timer," Lily announced, plopping the pocket watch on the blanket. Margaret stroked the metal surface. "Whose treasure?" "Mr. Whitmore's. He lent it so we can hear time cheering for us." Margaret's eyes shimmered. "Then let us not waste the applause." Outside, Gerald spoke with Elaine like a commander delivering coordinates. "Fine Life Pulse Medical. Direct purchase, not lease. Route expedited courier. I'll fund hazard shipping." He paused, listening. "Yes, 8 hours. Notify Dr. Alvarez. She'll calibrate." Another pause. "Also secure portable defib units. They'll upgrade later anyway. Charge to Whitmore Emergency Fund." As he ended the call, Thomas approached. "Need me to run errands, sir?" "Refuel, then stand by for courier escort." Gerald wiped rain from his glasses. "Today we race bureaucracy." Back in the hospice, Lily guided Gerald to a small art room where patients and families painted ceramics. She wanted to distract him while waiting for updates. "Pick a tile," she insisted, handing him a smock that barely reached his elbows. He chose a blank 6-inch square. The table held cheap acrylics. "But color is color to a child." Lily dipped a brush in deep purple. "Lavender, obviously," she said. "We paint the garden we gonna plant." Gerald hesitated. He had commissioned modern masterpieces but never painted one. Lily nudged him. "Start with the soil. Everything needs roots." He selected brown, mixing with a dash of green. As strokes filled the tile, he forgot the ticking watch, the ambulance threat. For 10 minutes he was an apprentice to an 8-year-old master. When they finished, 2 clumsy lavender stalks rose from rich earth beneath a bright sun. "That is hope," Lily declared. "Ugly lines, pretty idea." Gerald left the sound echoing off tile floors. "I'll display it in my office." "No," Lily shook her head. "Put it in the garden at Rosewood so Grandma sees it when she walks outside after surgery." The future tense lodged in his throat. "When she walks." He nodded. "Deal." A page on the overhead intercom summoned him to administration. He found Janice holding a fax confirmation of monitor shipment at a 3:20 p.m. via helicopter drop to Memorial Helipad, ambulance transfer to Rosewood. "Helicopter?" Janice said, incredulous. "The sky has fewer traffic lights," Gerald quipped. Dr. Alvarez arrived at noon, lab coat replaced by scrubs. She reviewed the plan, adjusting ventilator settings to prepare patients for temporary power toggles. "We can finish install by 9 p.m. Calibration by 10. Upload test data and satisfy the county by 11:30. Cutting it close," Gerald noted. "Medicine and miracles both like the 11th hour." She winked. Grace volunteered to coordinate patient families for the brief outages. She moved through hallways with lipboards and a nervous smile, growing into administrative shoes she never thought she'd wear. At 2:55 p.m., faint thwump of rotor blades trembled windows. Staff gathered at upper floor vantage points. Lily pressed her nose to glass. "Icicle wide. It's like a dragon bringing treasure," she whispered. The helicopter hovered above Memorial 3 blocks away. EMS loaded crates marked fragile medical device onto 2 ambulances, which arrived at Rosewood by 3:40 p.m. Gerald signed delivery receipts. His signature shook only slightly from adrenaline. Install teams in orange vests swarmed corridors, wheeling monitors like prize mares. Cables flanked walls, extension cords formed trip hazards that volunteers flagged with neon tape. For 2 hours the hospice felt less like a resting place and more like a moon landing prep site. Meanwhile, Margaret dozed lightly, sedated to conserve energy. Lily sat beside her reading Charlotte's Web, stumbling on archaic words but soldiering through. Gerald popped in every 20 minutes, each time surprised by how the room calmed him, beeping harmony amidst logistical chaos. At 7:15 p.m., a breaker failed, plunging half the West Wing into shadow. Emergency lighting flickered. Janice cursed softly. Gerald's pulse spiked. Generator. Old and crabby, she replied. Kicks in after 15 seconds. A heart-stopping eternity later. Lights returned. Gerald exhaled. Replace the generator, he ordered. Yes, sir, Janice said, as if that were the most natural response in the world. By 9:48 p.m., the last monitor beeped alive in test mode. Green waveforms dancing like mountain ranges across black oceans. Dr. Alvarez verified data upload. Now we wait for the computer to verify integrity. How long? 40 minutes. Gerald glanced at his father as watch resting on a tray. Lily had returned it, claiming time needed to stay with its owner for the final lap. He closed the lid, resetting resolve. At 10:31 p.m., the server pinged success. Alvarez flashed thumbs up. Staff exhaled collective relief. Lily, half asleep in a hallway chair, murmured, "Did we win?" Gerald knelt. "We won today. At midnight we get a trophy?" He smiled. "A certificate that says still open." She scrunched her nose. "Boring trophy. It means more stories." "Oh," she yawned. "Good trophy." Gerald carried her to a recliner in room 18. Margaret stirred, eyes glinting curiosity. He whispered, "We beat a clock. Rest." She mouthed, "Thank you," though sound barely came. With 30 minutes spare, Gerald stepped outside. Cool night air greeted him, freshly washed by earlier rain. The courtyard fountain burbled. He sat on a bench, mind replaying the day. Traffic, inspectors, helicopters, each obstacle surmounted by teamwork he once believed money alone could buy. Money had opened doors, yes, but people had walked through them. Elena's voice buzzed from his phone. "I assume you re-alive?" Alert and upright. "Board is furious you missed emergency finance call. Tell them a different emergency needed finance." "Will they accept that?" "They'll accept my resignation if they prefer." He said it lightly but knew the possibility was real. Elaine paused. "You were willing to lose the company?" Gerald looked at hospice windows glowing warm against the dark. "I'd rather lose old armor than new purpose." Elaine sighed, admiration disguised as exasperation. "Then I'll keep sharpening swords here." "Thank you." He ended the call, feeling simultaneously lighter and more endangered than ever. Legacy wars loomed, but tonight the Lavender Army held the field. At 11:47 p.m., a notification pinged. County database updated. Rosewood Hospice compliance conditional. Satisfactory reinspection deferred 6 months. Gerald forwarded it to Janice, Dr. Alvarez and Grace. Inside room 18, he whispered the good news to Margaret. Her fingers tightened around his. Midnight chimed on the pocket watch. Lily stirred, eyes half open. Time said yes, she mumbled before drifting back to sleep. Gerald sat back, realizing the day's fight had forged a new law in his universe. Some rides change you more than destinations. A morning journey across town had become a marathon of heartbeats, literal and metaphorical. The ride to Rosewood was now the ride for Rosewood, and maybe for every neglected place in the human map he'd ignored. He imagined tomorrow's ride: lighter traffic, new monitors humming, Margaret stronger, Lily's boots squeaking down corridors where hope no longer leaked through ceilings. He pictured hanging the ceramic tile in freshly tilled soil, cement walls reflecting sunlight, lavender scent weaving through open windows. A future built line by lavender line. Gerald closed his eyes. Somewhere deep in the hospice, a server logged its final compliance timestamp. But the click that mattered most was the steady tick inside his vest pocket, no longer just counting profits or even promises. Tonight it counted breaths of an old woman lying in a bed of second chances, an 8-year-old architect of miracles, and a 73-year-old student relearning the math of compassion. Tick, still here. Tick, still yours. Tick, keep going. And so he would. Dawn flickered into room 18 like a shy visitor, slipping between the blinds before any nurse had begun morning rounds. The new monitors hummed with quiet confidence, their soft green waves climbing and falling in a pattern that already felt as familiar as breath. Lily woke first, curled like a comma in the vinyl recliner. She stretched, boots thunking to the floor, and tiptoed to the bed. Margaret's eyes opened at once, light, alert, as if the monitor's rhythm were an alarm only she could hear. She smiled. "Good morning, Lily Bean." Lily pressed the back of her hand to her grandmother's forehead the way nurses did. "You feel less hot today." "Then the machines are earning their keep," Margaret murmured, turning slightly so the cannula tubes didn't pinch. Where's our resident knight? Sir Gerald is fetching breakfast, Lily announced with an exaggerated whisper. But Aunt Grace says he might be late because there is trouble in the castle. Margaret is brownet. What kind of trouble? Lily shrugged, braid flopping, grown-up kind, the kind that uses big words then drinks coffee about it. Margaret laughed softly but the sound dissolved into a cough. Lily lunged for the call button. Margaret halted her with a gentle wave. I am all right. Little medic, just clearing cobwebs. Behind them, the curtain that separated Margaret's bed from the neighboring patient swayed as someone pulled it aside. Mrs. Brant, frail, silver-haired, clutching an F-pole like a ballroom partner, peeked around the edge. Mornin' darlings, heard giggles, wanted in. Lily scampered over and offered an arm. Together they shuffled back to Margaret's bedside. Mrs. Brant winked. Machine orchestra sounds real professional today. Opening act for healing, Margaret said. And what is the headliner? The older woman asked. Lavender encore, Lily chimed. Both women smiled as though the phrase were a secret password. A knock. Grace slipped in holding 2 travel cups and a paper sack that smelled of cinnamon. Behind her came Gerald, but not in the slate-gray armor of previous mornings. Today he wore a navy cardigan over an open-collar shirt. The effect made him look oddly approachable, less statue, more grandfather. Morning, team, he greeted, setting a small bouquet of farmer market marigolds in the windowsill. Apologies for the delay. My board held me hostage over croissants. A dire fate, Margaret teased. Almost fatal, he said, then leaned closer. They reconvening in emergency vote to curtail my unapproved expenditures. Grace gasped. But everything you've done here. INT on the quarterly spreadsheet, he finished, shrugging. Numbers object. Lily climbed onto the foot of the bed. Tell them Grandma's more important than numbers. I did, he replied. Numbers argued they pay dividends. Lily huffed. Grandma paid dividends in kindness. Pay her back. Gerald smiled, pocket watch glinting. I rather like your accounting. Dr. Alvarez entered, tablet in hand. Speaking of accounting, let us tally your vitals. Mrs. Harper, she adjusted the bed, ran a quick auscultation, then tapped her screen. Good news, oxygen saturation steady at 95. Not so good news, creatinine creeping up. We need to keep an eye on kidney function. Margaret nodded calmly. Every hero has a side quest. Alvarez grinned. Indeed, today's quest hydration and lower sodium. We'll swap your UV bag after breakfast. She left to arrange labs, and Grace escorted Mrs. Brant back to her side. Gerald passed Lily a cinnamon roll half the size of her head, then pulled a chair close to Margaret. I've monopolized enough of your story, he said quietly. Time you told me some of it. Margaret's gaze drifted to the curtain seam as if weighing what could slip through. You sure? Stories can be heavier than machines. I've lifted heavier, he claimed. She took a breath that wheezed at the edges. Very well. Curtain closed. He stood, drew the divider fully across, sealing them into a pocket of hushed light. Lily curled up with her pastry near the food board, listening with wide open ears. Start where you like, Gerald prompted. Then I'll start with a library, she said, because every good secret hides between shelves. Lily leaned forward. You mean the school library where you worked? Yes, dear. Brookshire Elementary, 1965 to 2007. Thousands of children wandered those aisles, but a few carved initials in my heart. One was a boy, gangly, worn sneakers, always hungry for books on how things work. Engines, bridges, bank vaults. He signed out more manuals than magic tales. Gerald's brows lifted. Sounds familiar. I thought you might see the resemblance, Margaret said, eyes twinkling. That boy was named Gerald Whitmore Jr. actually, 9 years old. Lily squealed. Plot twist. Gerald froze, pulse tripping. I went to Brookshire until 5th grade. We moved after my father's accident, but I barely remember the library. Margaret squeezed his hand. You spent every recess there hiding from bullies. I let you dismantle a busted projector so you could figure it out. You fixed it using a paperclip and gum. Gerald stared, memories unfurling like dusty banners, a cool room smelling of glue and old pages. A gentle voice urging, take your time, dear. He swallowed. That was you. Yes, and I kept your secret stash of extra lunch crackers so others wouldn't tease you. Emotion surged raw. You saved me from feeling poor. I saved a lot of children from something, she said softly. Loneliness, mostly. Your wife, Evelyn, volunteered in that same library as a high school senior. She shelved romance novels and hummed Sinatra. Gerald's throat tightened painfully. Evelyn never mentioned it. She probably didn't. He realized the coincidence. But I remember how your eyes followed her when she visited during alumni week. You were 16 then, she was 15. You both signed the guest book. Margaret gestured toward a small tote on the bedside table. Guest book is in there. I kept it all these years. With trembling hands, Gerald opened the tote. Inside lay a faded ledger. He turned pages until 1970. Evelyn Clark chasing dreams between pages. 2 lines below, Gerald Whitmore building them. The ink looked fragile enough to crumble. Tears blurred his sight. I thought I built everything alone, he whispered. No one builds alone, Margaret said, but we forget who handed us the first brick. He exhaled shackily. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because you weren't ready to remember. People open books when the chapter matters. Lily nudged closer, wiping powdered sugar off her chin. Grandma says hearts are libraries, they don't lose stories. They just misplace them. Gerald chuckled through tears. Then mine misshelved quite a few. Margaret's smile faded. There is another secret, one heavier. He studied. I can lift it. My hospital bills didn't erase my savings. I had a modest nest egg. But I spent most of it paying tuition Grace's night classes. Lily's future college fund. Grace returned just then, overhearing. Mom, you promised not to worry about that. I'm explaining, Margaret insisted. I saved enough to last if my heart held steady. When it failed, the money drained fast. But there is a policy in old life insurance payout for my late husband. I never filed it. Gerald blinked. Why not? Because the beneficiary is someone else, someone I felt needed it more. She pointed at the ledger, turned to the last page. Gerald obeyed. A yellow envelope was taped there, sealed, Gerald's name penned in firm handwriting. I signed the policy over to you after Evelyn died, Margaret said. I saw your grief in the papers, how you buried yourself in mergers. I feared you'd forget the gentle parts of you. Money can be a mirror or a blindfold. I wanted mine to be a mirror. He stared shocked. You intended to leave your savings to me? Yes, but life rewrote plans. You arrived with helicopters before I could send that envelope. Grace interjected, voice trembling. Mom, you mean you were willing to leave us with nothing? Not nothing, Grace. You have each other and you have stories. She reached for her daughter's hand. Gerald lost his. Silence rippled like a stone in still water. Lily sniffed. That is too sad, she said. We rechanging the ending, right? Gerald unfolded to his full height, resolve crystallizing. Yes, we are. Mrs. Harper, I can accept your policy. Tomorrow I'll sign it back. And I'll fund Lily's education separately with interest. Margaret shook her head. You already have. He frowned. How? You showed up. You listened. You painted ugly lavender stalks just to make a child laugh. That is wealth. He lowered himself again, voice breaking. Then let us deposit interest daily. Dr. Alvarez returned with labs. Her smile faded when she saw Gerald's tears. Bad news. Old news, Margaret answered, being reshelved. Alvarez reviewed the chart. Kidneys stable after fluids. We re-clear for pre-op imaging tomorrow. Gerald glanced at Margaret. Ready for another chapter? Ready as the paper, she quipped. Lily clapped. New chapter title, Heart Fixing with Friends. Grace chuckled and hugged her mother. Gerald stepped out to call Elaine. In the corridor he inhaled the mingled scents of disinfectant and cafeteria coffee, oddly comforting now. Elaine answered on first ring. Board meeting moved up. They vote at 4 o'clock p.m. Gerald glanced at his watch. 12:17. 4 hours. They'll strip your discretionary authority, she warned. Put me on video conference from the hospice common room. They expect you in person. They can expect compassion from a ledger, too. He ended the call and stared at the watch, imagining those engraved initials still guiding him. Keep going. Back inside room 18, Lily practiced tracing her name on thank you cards for nurses. Gerald joined her, his handwriting rusty but steady. Margaret watched them, a librarian pleased with silent study. When cards were done, Lily curled beside her grandma and Grace left to fetch lunch trays. Gerald drew the curtain halfway, giving the two Harpers a cocoon of privacy, then sank into the recliner. He opened the sealed insurance envelope. Inside lay a simple note. Gerald passed this forward wherever love is needed. Margaret. No check, no policy paperwork, only trust. He folded it carefully, placed it in his pocket over his heart and whispered, I will. His phone pinged Elaine again. CFO rallying boats. Gerald typed, tell them the library is open. She responded with a question mark. He smiled. The board would learn that stories, not stocks, now dictated his moves. At 3:45 p.m., the common room as TVG served as improvised conference screen. 10 directors in polished boxes glared at Gerald's cardigan's figure flanked by a floral couch and a drip stand. He greeted them calmly. Gentlemen, ladies, before you vote, meet my shareholder. He angled the camera toward Lily, who waved, missing front teeth. This is Lily Harper, age 8 3/4, Gerald continued. Her dividends are measured in minutes with her grandmother, Margaret, who is about to enter a pioneering trial our foundation now funds. If you deem my allocations reckless, replace me, but I urge you to first calculate the cost of not acting. A few directors shifted uncomfortably. The CFO protested about fiduciary duty. Gerald listened, then replied, our charter cites community enrichment as mission. Today enrichment means life. Vote as you must, but understand I will choose lavender over ledger every time. The virtual floor fell silent. After a brief closed session they returned. Majority ruled to retain him but imposed tighter oversight. Gerald accepted. Unflinching. Oversight is welcome, he said. Eyes that see people, not just profits. Call ended. Gerald exhaled. Lily offered a high five. He returned it, the smack echoing like a gavel. That evening, Gerald sat beside Margaret as twilight spilled bruised purple across the window, the same hue as their painted tile. She was tired but eyes gleamed. You kept your kingdom, she whispered. I traded armor for librarians, he said. Well chosen. She reached under her pillow, pulled out a small plastic bag of dried lavender. Saved for my garden years ago, for luck. He upped the bag, inhaled faint fragrance. I think luck has been rehired. Lily leaned over the rail. Can we plant some tomorrow in the courtyard? Absolutely, Gerald promised. We'll sneak out soil if we must. Margaret chuckled. Lavender smuggling, I approve. Nurse Janice peeked in to administer evening maids. Seeing the group, she smiled. Looks cozy. Family reading hour, Gerald said. Janice adjusted a drip, then paused. Mr. Whitmore, your monitors saved Mrs. Klein in room 7 this afternoon. Arrhythmia caught early. Tears glimmered. Thank you. He nodded, throat too tight for words. After lights dimmed, Gerald remained, flipping through the old guest book. Names of children grown, some crossed out, some annotated, moved, graduated, married. Here and there Margaret S. margin notes, loves dinosaurs. Worried about parents, great singer and courage choir. Each line proof that quiet souls build empires unseen. He closed the ledger, heart pounding with a new mandate: archive these stories. Weave them into rosewood as walls, maybe even publish them so donors could read the real dividends of kindness. Outside, rain tapped gently, lavender scent mingling with petrichor where someone, perhaps a late shift nurse, had scattered the dried buds onto the courtyard soil. Tomorrow, he'd kneel there with Lily, pressing seeds into earth that had forgotten color. Tomorrow, secrets woven behind a bedside curtain would germinate in open air. For now, Gerald watched Margaret sleep. Her chest rose and fell slower but steadier than before. The monitor translated each breath into digital mountains, peaks, and valleys mirroring the roads they still had to travel. He rested his hand on hers, silently thanking the librarian who once saved a lost boy and who now, in needing saving herself, had rescued him all over again. Behind the curtain, Lily dozed, murmuring story fragments, engines, bridges, lavender kingdoms. Gerald closed his eyes, letting the words settle. Libraries, after all, are never silent. They breathe through readers, one heartbeat at a time. And somewhere deep in Whitmore Tower, spreadsheets waited impatiently, but tonight, their columns could wait, because the only cell that mattered right now displayed a simple, steady figure glowing green, 72 beats per minute and holding. Sunrise arrived wrapped in crow's gold haze, painting the hospice windows a color somewhere between hope and memory. It was the first morning in a week that didn't begin with rain, and everyone at Rosewood moved a little quicker, as if sunlight were coffee for the soul. Gerald Whitmore noticed it the moment he stepped from his town car to on brick pathways. Birds testing new melodies, a nurse humming Sira while arranging breakfast trays. He carried a paper bag that smelled of butter and honey and a small cardboard box marked fragile plants inside. In the crook of his other arm balanced a thermos covered in crochet, the handiwork of Mrs. Brandt, who presented it yesterday with strict instructions: keep her tea hot, keep his hands warm. Thomas closed the trunk and paused. Shall I come back for you after lunch, sir? No, Gerald said. Today I stay until the moon clocks out. He winked, a gesture that looked brand new on his usually stoic face. Thomas smiled, tipped his hat, and drove away. Inside, the lobby buzzed like a farmer's market. Tex wheeled extension cords toward a supply closet, part of Gerald's ongoing modernization as housekeeping swapped faded curtains for fresh linen ones Grace had chosen in sea mint green. The color brightened the hall, as if the walls themselves inhaled. Grace met him halfway. Morning, Mr. Whitmore. Oh, you brought the starters. She indicated the plant box. Lavender, of course, he replied, and 2 rosemary because the gardener insisted they be companion herbs. I thought anything named after remembrance belonged here. Grace nodded, lips pressing together to hold back emotion. Courtyard is ready. Lily and I tilled a patch yesterday. Well, Lily tilled, I chased wasteward worms. Gerald laughed. She'll make a fearless botanist. He lifted the paper bag. And I have another treasure, honey butter toast from Margot's cafe. Grace's eyes widened. The line is a block long every morning. Money can buy love, but it can speed Q times. He joked. Shall we? They entered room 18 to find Lily perched on the side rail, brushing her grandmother's hair with a pink plastic comb. Margaret's silver strands fell like river water over the fresh pillowcase. She looked tired but luminous, cheeks carrying faint color the monitors could never quantify. Good morning, Queen of Libraries, Gerald greeted. Margaret opened her eyes fully, recognition bright. And good morning, King of Toast. Lily sniffed the air. Is that cinnamon? With honey butter, Gerald affirmed, placing the bag on the tray table. Nurse Janice entered to take vitals. After the routine beep beep beep, she whispered. Kidney numbers steady, beat low normal. Keep hydrating. She turned to Gerald. Dr. Alvarez will brief everyone at 9 about imaging results. Margaret patted Lily's knee. Hear that? Today's word of the day is steady. Lily beamed. Like cement walls. Gerald set the thermos beside the bed and poured steaming liquid into a ceramic mug painted with dancing sunflowers, another Lily project. A sweet spy aroma filled the room, chamomile blended with a pinch of cinnamon and, thanks to Gerald's research, hawthorn berries for heart health. Custom brew, he said. Approved by Dr. Google, verified by Dr. Alvarez. Margaret sipped carefully. Tastes like sitting on a porch swing in 1963's. Lily crawled closer. Grandma, guess what we're replanting today? Lavender, unless Mr. Whitmore abandoned his brand, Margaret teased. And rosemary, Lily announced, bouncing. Because memory. Then we shall remember everything, Margaret replied, squeezing her granddaughter's hand. Gerald's phone vibrated. Elaine. He silenced it, not ready to swap tea for tension. But the second buzz carried urgency. He excused himself, stepping into the hallway. Elaine spoke fast. CFO Hammond filed a motion with the executive committee. They want to freeze discretionary funds until an external audit. Gerald frowned. What time is the vote? 2 p.m. Your presence strongly recommended, in Hammond escorting the press. Rumors of wasteful heroics could leak by noon. He closed his eyes, collecting calm like chess pieces. Tell them I'll dial in at 1:30. Give the committee my updated financial report. Profit increase from the green energy division we seeded last year covers every cent spent here. Already drafted, Elaine said. But press loves a runaway billionaire story more than a balanced ledger. Then we'll offer them a better story, he replied. Have Martin from BU meet me here with a camera crew. Elaine paused. You re-inviting media into a hospice? Only if Margaret agrees, he said. We'll show the world how waste spells life. Understood, she said. Exhale audible. I'll wrangle releases. Gerald hung up. Guilt-tugging, turning Private Grace into public defense felt wrong. Yet letting cynics frame the narrative felt worse. He returned to room 18. Margaret immediately read his face. Storm clouds. Bored politics, he admitted. May I ask something delicate? You may ask. I'll decide if it is delicate, she said. He explained the situation, careful not to color it with bitterness. A short interview could protect funding not just for Rosewood but future projects. But this is your space, your story. She considered, then glanced at Lily, who was taste-testing toast crumbs with an air of culinary critique. If telling the truth helps others, then yes, but only truth. No sage statues. Deal, he agreed. Grace volunteered to coordinate patient privacy with the head nurse. Media would film only common areas, garden, hallway, unless other families consented. Gerald felt the knot in his chest loosen. At 9 o'clock, Dr. Alvarez entered with imaging printouts tucked under her arm. She projected them on a tablet so Margaret could see the inside of her own heart, a surreal geography of chambers and valves. Here we are, Alvarez said, pointing at an area lit in orange. The thinning wall chant worsened. That is victory number 1. Kidneys cooperating, victory 2. IV scheduled surgical preclearance for tomorrow morning. If labs stay stable, operation is Monday. 3 days, the room inhaled collectively. Lily whispered, that is almost my half-birthday. Then we'll celebrate both, Gerald said. Alvarez laid out a planned 12-hour fast before surgery, antibiotic course, risk disclosures. Margaret listened, steady as the word of the day. When Alvarez asked any questions, Margaret replied, can I still plant lavender today? With a mask and gloves, brief exposure, Alvarez granted. Sunlight is good medicine. By late morning, the courtyard resembled a tiny construction zone. Groundskeepers donated by Whitmore Real Estate had pre-dug a crescent bed near the fountain. Lily arrived wearing a child-sized surgical mask decorated with hand-drawn flowers. She carried a toy shovel and a packet of seeds. Margaret, masked and gloved in the wheelchair, rolled alongside Gerald, who bore the plant box like a sacred scroll. Grace trailed with a camera borrowed from the activities closet. Mrs. Brandt watched from a window, waving. Other patients peeked, cheeks pink with curiosity. Ready? Lily asked her grandmother. Plant commander, execute, Margaret replied. Lily placed the first lavender sprout into soil. Gerald knelt, tamping dirt gently. Margaret scattered dry buds from her old garden like confetti. Each movement felt symbolic, as if burying fear under fragrance. Grace filmed, voice trembling, and here we see future butterflies negotiating real estate deals. Lily giggled. When Rosemary went in, Gerald quoted a line he'd googled the night before. Rosemary for remembrance. Pray you love remember. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Hamlet, Act 4. She noted, not my favorite tragedy but apt. We'll rewrite it as a comedy, he said. The planting ended with a watering can pass like a peace pipe. Lily insisted they all make a wish. Gerald closed his eyes and, to his surprise, words formed instantly. Let every seed find what it needs. He opened them to see Margaret wiping a tear. Lily clapped dirt from her gloves. Grandma, what is your wish? That you and Mr. Whitmore always have gardens to share, she said. Media arrived at noon, 2 reporters and a cameraman, escorted by Martin from BVU wearing a tie strewn with tiny typewriters. Gerald introduced them to Margaret and Grace, who both insisted on first names, no titles. Lily volunteered as tour guide. Reporter Dana Hill, mid-50s with empathetic eyes, began filming by the new garden. Tell us what is happening here, she prompted. Lily lifted her chin. We're regrowing hope. It smells nice and cures stomachs, Grandma said. Dana softened. And who helped you plant hope? Mr. Whitmore, but everyone watered, Lily said, gesturing to nurses leaning from doorways. Dana shifted to Gerald. Critics say diverting corporate funds to one facility is unorthodox. Even reckless. Your response? Gerald glanced at Margaret, who nodded discreetly. He faced the camera. Reckless is knowing you have the resources to ease suffering and choosing not to. Finance should serve humanity, not the reverse. Dana pressed. Will shareholders agree? Ask them after they smell lavender, he said. Returns measured in heartbeats ripple further than quarterly graphs. The soundbite glowed. Martin looked relieved. Inside, they filmed brawl monitors beeping, volunteers reading aloud, Lily delivering thank you cards. Dana interviewed Mrs. Brandt, who declared, first time in years I've seen walls change color before my hair appointment. The cameraman laughed, a genuine sound. By 1:20 p.m., Gerald slipped into the family lounge for the virtual board meeting. Elaine had set up a laptop on a rolling cart. As directors logged in, Martin signaled thumbs up, footage secured. CFO Hammond appeared, stern. Mr. Whitmore, we've reviewed unauthorized disbursements. He projected spreadsheets. Total expenditures $3.4 million and counting. Gerald listened calmly. Line 47 shows green energy earnings beat projections by $5 million. Net positive, he stated. A director named Cole frowned. But risk profile. Risk? Gerald interrupted. We ensured compliance upgrades now mandatory across hospice facilities. Avoided fines, lawsuit exposure. He summarized cost-benefit like reciting grocery lists. The board murmured. Elaine, off camera, messaged news segment goes live at 5. Public opinion tide incoming. Hammond realized the optic shift. We still require oversight. Transparency always, Gerald agreed. But remember, our mission includes community stewardship. He angled the webcam to show the courtyard garden, Lily waving from below. Stewardship is not charity, it is strategy. Healthy communities buy houses. Start businesses, create revenue. Vote proceeded. Motion to freeze funds failed by narrow margin. Hammond's box dimmed, camera off. Gerald thanked the board. Meeting ended. He leaned back, exhale shaking. Elaine entered lounge with coffee. You just hosted a masterclass. Had good teachers, he replied, nodding toward Margaret's room. Afternoon unfolded peacefully. Lily convinced Gerald to help decorate surgical masks with markers. His featured a crooked lavender sprig. Hers a superhero logo reading forward the G for Grandma. They paraded hallway runways, earning applause. At 5, TVs across Rosewood aired Dana Hill segment. Patients, staff, and visitors gathered. The piece blended shots of the new garden, upgraded monitors, and Lily's earnest explanation of help versus money. Gerald's quote closed the segment. Finance should serve humanity, not the reverse. The anchor smiled sincerely, a rare primetime miracle. Twitter buzzed. Grace checked secretly. Hashtags lavender logic and heart fixer trended. Donations pinged Rosewood's website faster than servers could count. Gerald overheard Janice gasp. Someone just covered next month's pharmacy bill. Evening glow filtered through the cement curtains, turning them turquoise. Margaret sipped more tea. Eyes puddled. I always loved that color, she whispered. Reminds me of the ocean Dad took us to before he passed. Gerald, sitting bedside, asked when was that? Summer of 49. I was 10. We collected shells so white they looked like moon slivers. She closed her eyes, smiled. I am still collecting shells, I guess. Lily climbed up to snuggle. We'll go to the beach again. Grandma, after surgery, after rehab, after everything. Yes, Margaret said, voice a feather. We'll gather new shells together. Grace fetched supper trays, tomato soup, grilled cheese. Margaret managed a few bites, which the nurses called victory. 3 of the day. Gerald picked at his sandwich. Hospital bread didn't taste like Margot's toast, but hunger erased snobbery. At 8, Dr. Alvarez returned with final pre-op instructions. She noticed the painted masks. Very couture, she said, then addressed Margaret. Tomorrow we run anesthesiology tests. We'll keep you comfortable. I trust you, Margaret answered. And I trust your stubborn heart, Alvarez replied. Lights dimmed gradually. Lily fell asleep sprawled across 2 chairs, superhero mask sliding to her chin. Grace wheeled her to the family dorm down the hall. Gerald stayed. Margaret spoke into the hush. You know, Gerald, your father visited our library once after your family moved. He thanked me for keeping you safe. He said you'd change the world. I said he already did. He fixed a projector. Gerald's eyes stung. I spent decades chasing mountains so my father's faith wouldn't be wasted. It never was. She reached for his hand. But mountains aren't the only wonders. Sometimes growing a lavender stalk is the bravest thing. He squeezed her fingers. Stay brave with me. I intend to, she whispered. He retrieved the insurance note still folded in his pocket. Your gift signed back to you. He presented a new envelope addressed to Grace. For whatever life needs next. I told you, Margaret began. You pass love forward, he interrupted. Let it circle back. She accepted, lips trembling. Then promise me you will keep circling. Like hands on my watch, he vowed. They sat quietly, monitors playing lullaby. Outside, courtyard lights illuminated lavender seedlings. Tiny silhouettes against soil that still breathed evening warmth. Gerald pictured them pushing roots downward all night. Unseen but unstoppable. Just before midnight, He whispered a journal entry in his mind. Day 5 toast. T. Turning points. Helped plant hope. Saved funding. Learned my life's equation. Kindness multiplied never divides. As he drifted into shallow sleep, he heard the fountain beyond the window and realized its rhythm matched the heartbeat on Margaret's monitor, a water pulse echoing a human one. He thought nature imitates courage. Gerald slept lightly, leaning forward in the chair, his hand never leaving Margaret's. And outside, Lavender dreamed of blooming rosemary, of remembering, and somewhere far away, critics refreshed stock tickers, unaware that tomorrow, a library of hearts would read a brand new story, one written in tea steam, toast crumbs, and the quiet turning point where a billionaire chose to stay. The night nurse, doing rounds, paused to take in the tableau, an elderly woman dozing peacefully, a one-untouchable mogul keeping vigil, and the lingering scent of chamomile. She adjusted a blanket edge, then whispered as she left, steady as sunrise. And the monitors agreed. Room 214 was never meant to be anyone's favorite place. It sat at the far end of Rosewood's second-floor wing, originally reserved for short-term recovery patients but later converted into a staging suite for those headed to outside hospitals. The lighting was harsh, the paint a forgettable beige, and the single window looked straight at a brick wall. To most, the room felt like a layover, neither here nor there. But on Saturday morning, 24 hours before surgery, room 214 began a metamorphosis no architect could have predicted. Gerald Whitmore arrived at 6:30 a.m. with two goals: ensure Margaret Harper's transfer to Memorial Medical Center went smoothly and transform the sterile space into an oasis sturdy enough to carry her through the longest night of her life. He wore rolled-up sleeves, a navy baseball cap Lily had insisted he buy at the gift shop for gardening vibes, and shoes he didn't mind destroying. In one hand he balanced a tote bursting with supplies, battery-powered fairy lights, watercolor prints of lavender fields, a Bluetooth speaker, and a mason jar full of freshly cut rosemary sprigs. In the other he carried a slim steel lunchbox his father's now filled with homemade shortbread he debaked at 3 a.m. because sleep refused to visit. Grace met him at the nurse's station, hair pulled into a practical knot, eyes rimmed with fatigue and determination in equal measure. "She is almost ready," she said, "vitals stable. Dr. Alvarez will be by at 8 to sign final transport orders." "Any overnight surprises?" Gerald asked, scanning the status board. "Only good ones," Grace replied, tapping the entry for room 18B 11872. Set 94, or 71. "I am calling it a winning streak." They pushed Margaret's wheelchair through the hallway that now smelled faintly of new paint. Additional cement panels were drying on the opposite wall. Lily walked beside them, brandishing a clipboard like a parade marshal. She drafted the day's agenda in rainbow marker. 1. Move Grandma to 214. 2. Make it pretty. 3. Listen to garden music. 4. Eat courage cookies. 5. Say goodnight but not goodbye. Margaret glanced at the list and smiled. Ambitious schedule. "Never underestimate a to-do list with glitter," Lily said, tapping a sparkly sticker shaped like a star. When they reached room 214, Gerald swung the door wide. The fluorescents flickered on with an unflattering buzz. Lily wrinkled her nose. "This looks like a homework closet." "Which is why we brought extra magic," Gerald answered. He set the toad on a bedside chair. "Operation Make-Believe Meadow commences now." Grace helped her mother settle onto the freshly made bed. The sheets were plain white, but Lily quickly draped a lavender-colored fleece over the top. "First layer softness," she declared. Gerald unpacked his supplies. The watercolor prints ordered overnight from a same-day framing company featured endless purple rows under bright blue skies. He staggered them on the beige walls with removable hooks, instantly tricking the eye into seeing distance where only drywall had existed. Lily stuck tiny adhesive butterflies along the frames. "Pollinators," she explained. Next came the fairy lights. Gerald climbed onto a step stool borrowed from maintenance, stringing warm LEDs along the ceiling's edge. When he flipped the switch, golden dots sparkled like early fireflies. Margaret's face bathed in the glow. Her eyes shimmered. "Looks like midsummer evenings on Granddaughter's farm," she whispered. Grace plugged in the Bluetooth speaker. A playlist Lily had curated called Heartbeats Garden Treats began with soft acoustic guitar layered under orchard birdsong. Even the hallway noise faded beneath the cocoon of gentle sound. Nurse Janice peeked in, eyebrows rising. "Well, this is new." Gerald handed her the mason jar of rosemary. "Would you place this on the windowsill? We're reworking on aromatherapy by stealth." Janice inhaled. "Smells like Thanksgiving and hope." She set it by the window, then scanned Margaret's vitals on the portable monitor. "Numbers are cooperative. Keep them happy, Mrs. Harper." Margaret lifted a brow. "I have an entire crew bribing them with ambience." By 8, room 214 no longer resembled a transition zone. It felt alive, still unmistakably a medical space, a pole and oxygen canister at the ready, but filled with hints of a world beyond fear. Lily moved a chair to the foot of the bed and placed her ceramic tile, the lavender stalks Gerald had painted, where Margaret could see it. "Every garden needs art," she pronounced. Soon Dr. Alvarez arrived, coffee in hand, surgical consent form stacked neatly under her arm. She stopped in the doorway, taken aback. Did I walk into the wrong wing? Because this looks like a boutique spa. Complimentary seats with every Gerald quipped. Alvarez reviewed Margaret's chart, listened to her lungs and nodded approvingly. We transport at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I've arranged a private ambulance so Lily can ride along if she wishes. Yes, Lily fist pumped. Alvarez turned to Gerald. We'll do final labs this afternoon, blood type cross-match. Clotting factors, then it is rest, hydration and visualization. Visualization, Lily asked. Patients who imagine positive outcomes often tolerate surgery better, Alvarez explained. So picture your heart beating strong. Margaret closed her eyes, breathing slowly. I see it already surrounded by lavender fields. Perfect, Alvarez said. Keep seeing that. The rest of the morning unfolded like controlled turbulence. Phlebotomists drew blood. A transport tech installed a bariatric-grade walker for post-surgical rehab, and a dietitian dropped off high-protein smoothies. Through it all, the tiny indoor garden held steady, lights twinkle in reassurance. At noon, Gerald excused himself to take a call from Elaine. She reported that media coverage had boosted the Foundation's donation page by $480,000 in 24 hours. Corporate email inboxes overflowed with messages bearing subject lines like "Lavender changed my mind about giving." Even Hammond had forwarded one donor's note with a grudging good press. That's a first, Gerald mused, leaning against a vending machine. Just don't let the halo slip, Elaine warned gently. Working on it, he promised, ending the call. When he returned, Lily was reading The Secret Garden aloud, an unnamed selection provided by Grace. Margaret listened, eyes half closed, while Gerald quietly unpacked lunch trays. He de-ordered specialty items from Marco's spring pea soup, whole grain rolls, and slices of bright lemon tart. The aroma replaced that sterile hospital scent with the kind of comfort usually reserved for family kitchens. During a pause in the story, Margaret gestured at Gerald's lunchbox. "You've carried that everywhere today. Something valuable inside?" He opened it and offered a shortbread cookie. "Just courage carbs." She nibbled, savoring the buttery crumble. Taste of childhood. He smiled. "My mother's recipe for special days and storms." As afternoon shadows lengthened, so did worries. The coming surgery loomed like a mountain whose peak vanished into clouds. Lily sensed the adult's tension and decided room 214 needed more wonder. She fetched a pad of construction paper and cut out rough-shaped sun, moon, stars, and big lavender blossoms with uneven petals. Gerald helped string them from poles and monitor stands, turning medical equipment into flower stalks. The transformation was absurd and perfect. Patients, staff, and even the janitor came to glimpse the room-turned-garden. Each left smiling, their own burdens lighter. Mrs. Brandt, shuffling in on her pole, stared at the fairy lights. "Looks like heaven waiting its turn," she whispered. Margaret took her hand. "Stick around. We'll paint the rest tomorrow." At 5 p.m., Dr. Alvarez returned with lab results, everything within safe parameters. She raised a brow at Gerald. "Your cookie must have antioxidant properties." He pretended to jot a note. "We'll patent." Grace wheeled in Lily's overnight bag, purple with holographic unicorns. Lily would spend the night in the family dorm again, but insisted on helping with the evening garden shift first. That meant dimming the fairy lights to twilight glow and switching the playlist to soft cello. Margaret hummed along. After supper, Gerald stepped outside for fresh air. The courtyard lavender seedlings were tiny but upright, leaves reaching like antennae. He knelt, touching the soil. It was still warm from the day's sun, and he imagined roots knitting themselves deeper, preparing for night. Back inside, he found Lily alone at the foot of the bed, clipboard abandoned. She looked thoughtful. "Mr. Whitmore, what happens if Grandma's heart doesn't like the new sleeve?" He sat in the chair beside her. "The doctors have backup plans, medicines, other devices, but you were really asking if she might not come home?" Lily's lower lip trembled. She nodded. He took a steadying breath. "When my wife, Evelyn, got sick, I asked the same question. Someone told me love isn't a contract guaranteeing forever. It is a promise to show up no matter what. That helped me breathe when answers felt slippery." "Did Evelyn come home?" Lily whispered. "No," the word sat heavy but honest, "but the love stayed. It filled spaces she left, helped me keep walking." Lily considered. "So if Grandma goes, love stays?" "Yes, and she is planting a lot of it." He gestured at the makeshift garden. Lily sniffed, still not ready. "Neither am I," he confessed. "That is why we make today as bright as we can." She crawled into his lap, head against his chest. "Your heart sounds like a drum." "It is learning new rhythms," he said. Grace re-entered, pausing at the doorway, her eyes moist. She mouthed thank you to Gerald. He only nodded. At 8, Lily reluctantly left to brush her teeth and change into pajamas. Gerald walked her down the hall, holding her overnight bag. Outside the dorm door, she hugged him fiercely. "You all stay with Grandma?" "Till sunrise," he assured. She looked up. "Then keep the garden alive." He tapped his chest. "Watered from here." When he returned, Margaret was studying the fairy lights. "You two have serious conversations," she observed. "She asks serious questions," he answered. Margaret patted the edge of the bed. "Sit." Time for librarian wisdom. He sat. You're carrying a load heavier than surgery prep, she said. A weight called what if I fail? But remember, success is not immortality. It is integrity. Show up, do the loving thing, and whatever outcome unfolds, you all have lived honorably. Gerald swallowed, unsure why the words cracked him open. I spent decades confusing success with guarantees. And now I am learning guarantees are brittle. She smiled softly. Clay pots, my father called them, you fill them. But they eventually chip. Love is earth it remolds. A silence settled, deep but gentle. The speaker played the final cello lullaby. Bow strokes slow and deliberate. Gerald realized his eyes were closing. He shifted to the recliner but kept one hand on Margaret's blanket. She whispered, if I drift off before morning, wake me with a library story. Preferably something with pirates or pie. He chuckled, deal. At 2:14 a.m., a coincidence that felt metaphoric, the bedside monitor beeped softly as a nurse changed her fluids. Gerald opened his eyes, saw Margaret sleeping peacefully, and let himself drift again. Twilight melted into dawn. A soft knock stirred Margaret's first transport order. 2Ms rolled in a gurney padded with memory foam. Grace entered behind them, Lily in unicorn pajamas clutching her plush owl. Dr. Alvarez followed, eyes alert yet kind. Morning squad, time to move our VIP. Lily helped secure her grandmother's favorite fleece over the gurney. She held Margaret's hand as the M slid her gently over. Gerald handed the rosemary jar to Grace. Take the scent with you, he said. The fairy lights flickered off for the first time, plunging room 214 into ordinary sterile glow. Gerald took one long look. Paper suns, lavender prints, the ceramic tile now resting on the side table. For a space designed as a layover, it had become a departure gate for courage. As they wheeled Margaret down the hallway, staff lined the route, nurses, cleaners, volunteers, some clapping softly, some wiping eyes. Lily waved her clipboard like a general. Outside, dawn had split the sky open with pink and coral. The private ambulance waited, engine humming. Dr. Alvarez climbed in first, checking monitors. Grace followed, then Lily. Gerald stepped forward. I'll drive behind you, he told Lily, 2 cars forming one convoy. She blew him a kiss. See you at the big hospital. The back doors closed. As the ambulance pulled away, Gerald noticed lavender seedlings in the courtyard catching early sun. He closed his eyes, sending a wordless prayer to every root grow strong. Then he turned to room 214 one last time. Monday it would house another patient, and the paper decorations would probably come down. But something permanent had been planted, the notion that spaces, like people, can transform when visited by unreasonable compassion. Gerald pocketed the ceramic tile, intending to deliver it to Margaret's new room post-surgery. He tapped his watch 6:05 a.m. and exhaled. The hardest day lay ahead. But the garden, now mobile in their hearts, would travel with them. He headed for his car, sunrise warming his back, and thought a garden grows wherever love insists. Inside the empty room 214, one fairy light, missed in the hurried cleanup, remained plugged in. It glowed quietly against the pale wall, a tiny star refusing to fade even after its companions rested. Anyone passing might think it an oversight, but perhaps it was intentional, a marker. A whisper, miracles pass through here, more will follow. And so, in a hospital wing where hope was often a visitor, a steadfast light continued to burn, holding the fort until lavender returned. The sun had scarcely shaken sleep from the skyline when the private ambulance curved into Memorial Medical Center's receiving bay. Pale lavender wisps coasted the horizon, as if sky itself had chosen tribute colors for the patient inside. Gerald Whitmore arrived a minute later, engine panting, hazards blinking like anxious fingertips. He stepped out, smoothing the wrinkled front of the same navy cardigan he'd worn all night, and watched hospital staff ease Margaret Harper's gurney down the hydraulic ramp. Memorial dwarfed rosewood in every measure, 12 stories, mirrored facade, atriums grown from glass and steel. But grandeur could not disguise the fact that everyone here, from millionaires to Medicaid recipients, arrived bearing the same invisible luggage: fear, hope, love. Gerald felt it crowd the loading zone like humid air. Lily emerged next, still in her unicorn pajamas but now wrapped in an oversized hoodie borrowed from Grace. She clutched her plush owl under one arm and the ceramic lavender tile under the other. When she spotted Gerald, she managed a sleepy smile. Convoy complete, she said, voice small but confident. He bowed theatrically, rearguard reporting for duty. Inside, fluorescent corridors branched like rivers. A charge nurse guided the entourage toward cardio-surgical pre-op. Dr. Celia Alvarez marched ahead, clipboard in hand, giving brisk instructions. We have 24 minutes to prep. Or 2 has been sterilized since 4 a.m. Anesthesiology on standby. Let us keep chatter calm. Stress hormones are sneaky saboteurs. Gerald noticed Lily's grip tighten on the tile with every medical phrase. He leaned down. Remember your playlist? She nodded. Play it in your head, every song. What about you? I'll hum along terribly off key. Her smile returned, fragile but present. Per cop suite each looked more like a lunar lab than a holding room. Blue gowns, beeping telemetry rigs, the smell of antiseptic sharp enough to slice thought. Margaret lay on a padded bed while 2 nurses applied eggy patches. Her eyes tracked Lily, then Gerald. Room service here is efficient, she joked, voice raspier than yesterday but steady. Grace set the rosemary jar on a rolling stand. A nurse eyed it warily. Dr. Alvarez waved approval. Caramitis decrease cortisol, she said. Science says yes. Alvarez double-checked of lines, then addressed Margaret. In 15 minutes we wheel you to the theater. Any last questions? Margaret pointed at Lilius Owl. Is Hoots joining me? Sterile protocol forbids plush sidekicks, Alvarez answered, but we'll place him in the recovery bay so he has first thing you see. Margaret nodded, then glancing at Gerald, and you'll all be second. Wild horses old and tea keep me away, he said. Outside the suite, hospital protocol allowed only 1 visitor for the final 5-minute window. Grace urged Lily forward. Give Grandma her superpower hug. Lily climbed onto a stool, leaning close. When they fix your heart, imagine it beating to our garden song, okay? Already cued, Margaret whispered. They pressed foreheads together, one snow white, one freckled bronze, and Gerald felt his own pulse stumble at the sight. He looked away, composing himself, only to meet Grace's gaze. Tears balanced like glass in her eyes. I need to sign papers, she said quietly. Admitting forms? She shook her head. Guardianship contingency. Social worker called yesterday. They need it before surgery in case she couldn't finish. Gerald understood at once. If Margaret didn't survive, legal guardianship of Lily had to be documented to avoid state custody limbo. Grace, unmarried, juggling 2 part-time jobs, met requirements, but paperwork still loomed like a storm cloud. Worse, the form required a backup guardian. Grace exhaled. I asked if you'd be willing to co-sign, just in case my finances scare child services. Gerald's throat tightened. I'd be honored. Before he could elaborate, a nurse opened the door. Time. Lily kissed her grandmother's cheek. See you after the victory nap. She climbed down, eyes flooding but unspilled. Gerald offered his hand. She took it. As staff wheeled Margaret away, Lily whispered a countdown 1, 2, 3 until the door to her hallway swung shut. Only then did she press the ceramic tile to her chest like a shield. Grace guided them to surgical family waiting, a wide room with Spartan couches and a digital board that displayed patient IDs next to colored status lights. Margaret's code name Harper M glowed yellow in procedure prep. A volunteer in a lilac vest approached with lipboards. Guardianship documents looked ridiculously cold blocks of legalese about minors. Primary caretaker, financial aptitude. Gerald's signature fit neatly on the cosigner line, but his heart felt anything but neat. As he dated the form, he realized the pen shook. He steadied it, recalling Margaret's words: integrity, not guarantees. Grace signed her section. Lily asked, can I sign? You're not 18 yet, Grace said gently. So, I am the minor, shouldn't I minor sign? Gerald smiled. Let us add your autograph at the bottom, a note for future historians. He turned the last page over, and Lily scribbled her name in looping letters, dotting the I with a lavender heart. The volunteer witnessed the addition with a soft chuckle. Paperwork done, they sat. Hospital time warp. Minutes stretched like gum. Seconds snapped unexpectedly when doors opened. Lily curled against Gerald, owl under chin. Tile balanced on her knees. He recited song titles from her playlist: Lavender Skies, Sunflower Waltz, Rosemary Road. She added secret lyrics between titles. It became their anti-anxiety Holland response. On the electronic status board, Harper M switched from yellow to blue. Procedure started 7:32. A collective sigh shimmered through the room, families reading their own blinking updates. Gerald stood to fetch coffee. Memorialist Cafe smelled more like hope than caffeine, aromas of steamed milk. Fresh muffins, quiet empathy. He ordered hot chocolate for Lily, chamomile for Grace, black coffee for himself. At the pastry case, he paused over lemon bars, Margaret's favorite. He bought 3. Returning, he found Lily sketching on the back of napkins a hospital shaped like a watering can, pouring hearts onto a lavender field. For Grandma's journal, she explained. Gerald pocketed the drawing carefully. Hours inched. The board turned gray for other families, some statuses shifting to recovery, others to 2. Each change carried ripples of sobs or exhalations. At 9:11, Harper M flashed green implant in place monitoring. Grace pressed hands to her mouth. Lily squeezed Gerald's arm so hard he winced and welcomed it. At 10:02, status changed again, closing, vital signs stable. Grace finally let a tear slide. Lily whispered, steady, steady, steady. 20 minutes later, Dr. Alvarez strode into the waiting room, still wearing surgical strobes. She pulled off her cap, releasing damp curls, and addressed them with a tired but triumphant smile. Procedure is complete. Bica sleeve seated correctly. Left ventral contractions improved by 22% during testing. No excessive bleeding. She has headed to cardio 2 for sedation and observation. Grace hugged the doctor before remembering protocol. Alvarez accepted it anyway. Lily asked, when can we see her? In about an hour, when she has settled, Alvarez replied, crouching to eye level. She may be sleepy and have lots of tubes. Don't let them scare you. They re-helpers. Lily nodded solemnly. Does her heart sound different now? Stronger, Alvarez said, like it remembered its favorite song. A low sob escaped Grace. Gerald placed a hand on the cardiologist's shoulder. Thank you, doesn't he stretch far enough, but thank you. Alvarez squeezed his fingers. She did the hard work. You all just inflated her courage. She left to oversee post-op orders. Gerald exhaled, astonished how air felt lighter inside lungs once reserved for boardrooms, now renovated by gratitude. Lily tugged his sleeve. Can we video call room 18 at Rosewood? Nurse Janice said she'd show the lavender garden. Gerald produced his phone. Grace helped dial. The screen filled with cement walls and fairy lights. Janice angled the camera to the courtyard seedlings. They were standing up straighter this morning, she reported. Must be heard about the heart tune-up. Lily held the tile to the camera. She's stable. Applause erupted from off-screen. Even housekeeping staff cheered. Gerald ended the call feeling a chain of hearts stretching across town. The hour passed. They scrubbed in, donned disposable gowns, and followed a nurse through double doors into Cardio 2, where machines breathed louder than people. Margaret lay pale but peaceful. Intubated, monitors painting neon mountain ranges across black screens. Soft ventilation whooshed. I've pumps clicked like distant metronomes. Lily froze at the doorway, all trembling. Gerald knelt. Remember helpers. She inhaled, stepped forward, and laid the ceramic tile on the bedside table. Grace placed the rosemary jar beside it. A nurse smiled at the scent. Gerald touched Margaret's hand, now tethered to an arterial line. It felt cooler, but beneath skin he sensed life thrumming steady. Stubborn. We kept our promise, he whispered. Grace traced a fingertip along the surgical dressing visible above the gown. Tears ran unhindered. She is here. That is all that matters. EU rules allowed 10 minutes. Lily used hers to recite, very softly, the first sentence of every chapter in The Secret Garden. Gerald listened, each line a breadcrumb leading Margaret back from anesthesia territory. Outside again, they collapsed onto hallway benches. A social worker approached Mara, the same one from Rosewood. She carried a slim folder. You handled the guardianship forms. Thank you. Grace sighed, grateful the worst-case scenario didn't happen. Paperwork often prevents chaos, Mara said gently. But there is another conversation. Advance directive for long-term rehab. We don't need it today. Surgery went well. Still, your mother should express her wishes once she is able. I can leave the forms. Grace rubbed her temples. More papers. Gerald interceded. We'll review tomorrow. Mara nodded and left. Lily asked why so many papers. Because adults fear forgetting promises, Gerald answered. Can't they just remember? Brains glitch. Doesn't he? She mulled that over. Maybe hearts remember even when brains glitch. Should write on hearts. He chuckled, working on the patent. They spent the afternoon in a family atrium, an airy lounge with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a rooftop garden. Large planters brimmed with kale and zinnias, part of Memorialist Therapy Farm. Lily pressed her face to glass. They have a garden too. Gerald asked a staff member if they could visit. 10 minutes later, they stood among raised beds buzzing with bees. A horticultural therapist named Jonah handed Lily a child-sized trowel. Help me transplant these marigolds. She dug with fervor, dirt under fingernails, worry escaping through fingertips. Grace sat on a bench, closing her eyes in the warm sun. Gerald assisted Jonah, surprised by how satisfying it felt to pat soil firm around roots. At 3 p.m., Dr. Alvarez texted patient extubated successfully. Responsive whispers, vital signs steady. Lily squealed. They rushed back but had to wait for vital rounds. In that hour, Gerald wandered into the hospital chapel. Simple wood pews, colored glass casting lakes of sunlight. He wasn't religious in any formal sense, but the silence welcomed him. He lit a candle, the first since Evelyn's funeral, and mouthed an unstructured prayer of thanksgiving and plea. Keep guiding her heartbeat. Keep us worthy of her faith. Returning to two, they found Margaret awake, oxygen cannula replacing vent tube. Eyes clearer, she couldn't speak loudly, but her smile said novels. Lily nudged Gerald forward. He showed Margaret a photo of the rooftop marigolds. She nodded, pressing his phone to her cheek like a seashell. A nurse delivered post-op instructions. Speak softly, limit visitors. Still, she allowed Lily 5 minutes of whispered storytelling. Gerald watched, marveling at resilience. A tiny girl leaning close, an older woman fresh from battle. Blades of fear dulled by shared wonder. Evening crept. Hospital policy required Lily to leave 2 by 8. Grace planned to stay in the visitor suite overnight. Gerald offered to drop Lily at Rosewood to sleep, but she refused. I want before. He arranged a hotel room next door. 2 beds, cartoon channel. Grace insisted he rest too. You can pour from an empty coffee pot. In the hotel lobby, Gerald picked up complimentary toothbrushes. Inside the elevator, Lily studied his face. Are you scared? I am something bigger than scared, he said. I am responsible. What does that feel like? He thought. Like carrying a fragile treasure across a swinging bridge. Exciting. Terrifying, worth every step. Grandma's heart is the treasure? In you and Grace. Maybe even me. She giggled. You're not fragile. He tapped his chest. All hearts are. They settled into the room. Lily raided the minibar for apple juice, and Gerald ordered grilled cheese from room service. While they waited, he skimmed business emails, investors celebrating the media bump, board members CCing him on philanthropic ideas. He flagged them for later today. His portfolio featured only high stats. After dinner, Lily brushed teeth, then climbed into bed clutching Hoots. Story, she asked. Gerald checked the time. 9:12. He sat at the bedside, telling a tale about a lighthouse built from library books, guiding lost ships with words that glowed. Lily's eyes fluttered, and soon sleep claimed her, owl slipping to the floor, steady breaths timed like soft waves. Gerald moved to the window, city lights shimmering. Somewhere in that constellation, Evelyn's memory hovered. He imagined her smiling approval. "You finally using your fortune for fortunes that matter," she might say. His phone buzzed again. "Elaine, I hate to intrude," she began, voice hushed, "but tax council needs your signature to classify the emergency grants. If done tonight, we save 6 figures in liabilities, which could fund Rosewood's generator." "I am on it," he said, appreciating the symbiosis of paperwork and compassion. Elaine hesitated. "How is she?" "Breathing like a hymn." "Good." He signed digitally, returned phone to pocket. Midnight neared. Gerald fetched an extra blanket, draped it over Lily, then eased into the second bed, shoes off for the first time in 20 hours. Exhaustion clamped down, but thoughts wandered. The guardianship forms, Margaret's fragile smile, the single light left on in room 214. At 12:07, his phone vibrated. A text from Dr. Alvarez. He normalized. "Heart rhythm strong, go sleep, tomorrow we walk." He replied, "Thank you for holding the bridge." The device slipped from his hand as sleep overtook him. Dawn tiptoed through curtains at 5:58. He woke to Lily standing by the window, pajamas replaced with jeans and her lucky red sweater. "I am ready," she said. "For what?" "To tell Grandma about her new heartbeats. We have to show her how to dance to them." Gerald chuckled, rising slowly. He looked out. Sunrise splashed orange over rooftops, an echo of the lavender dawn preceding surgery. Promises felt tangible in that light. They hurried across the sky bridge connecting hotel to hospital. Grace greeted them, holding 2 cups of cocoa from the lobby cafe. "She slept all night," she reported, voice buoyant. First thing she asked for lavender tea. "Into you." Margaret sat propped higher, eyes brighter though tired. She whispered, "Garden report?" Lily performed a mini dance, arms swaying like stalks in wind. Margaret laughed, a whisper cloud but real. Gerald noticed a folded paper on the bedside tray. Advance directive. Blank lines awaiting answers. He met Margaret's gaze. She shook her head slightly, a silent plea. "Not yet." "Live first." He nodded, sliding the form into a drawer. Dr. Alvarez appeared with a physiotherapist. Time for milestone 1. Dangling legs over the side of the bed. Lily's eyes widened. "Dangling is a victory." "A giant one," Alvarez assured. They guided Margaret carefully, every move slow, deliberate. When her feet touched floor, Lily clapped. Gerald felt tears threaten again over dangling feet, of all things. Therapist counted to 10. Margaret's face pinched with effort, but she held. Back onto the bed, she exhaled triumph. "Feels like standing on the moon." Grace wiped her mother's brow. "Moon looks good on you." Alvarez turned to Gerald. "We all transfer to step-down unit tomorrow if progress continues, then rehab." He nodded. "We all build ramps of lavender." Margaret extended a hand toward him. He held it, pulsating with hers. "You kept every promise," she whispered. "More to keep," he answered. "Then keep showing up." "I will." He thought about the difficult papers still waiting, the board emails accumulating, the taxes, the media follow-ups, all necessary, but none outweighed the woman clasping his hand, the child waving a pretend conductor baton, the sister planning sleeping rotations. He realized that responsibility carrying fragile treasure was becoming less terrifying, more sacred. In that moment, a new promise etched itself somewhere neither ink nor glitch could erase. He would keep the garden growing, in hospitals, in boardrooms, in every hinge of his remaining years. And he would sign every paper necessary to protect its roots, but never let the legalities obscure the petals. Outside the AU window, morning glinted off a rooftop, marigold bright gold set against purple sky. Gerald watched the petals sway and thought, even here, garden's fine sun. A nurse cleared her throat, readying the next round of meds. Visiting minutes ticked. Gerald kissed Margaret's forehead, a gesture that surprised them both, and stepped back. Lily saluted, owl tucked under her arm. In the corridor they paused beneath a skylight where sunrise pooled. Lily looked up. "We did the hard part." "The first hard part," Gerald corrected gently. "More steps ahead, but we've proven we can walk them." She nodded. "Then let us laminate today, in our hearts." He laughed softly, ruffling her hair. "Brains glitch, hearts laminate." They walked toward the elevators, hand in hand, carrying the scent of rosemary, the echo of steadier beats, and dawn promises rolled like scrolls inside their chests. Outside, traffic resumed its indifferent dance, but somewhere in the city, a single fairy light still glowed in an empty room, and lavender roots stretched deeper, refusing to yield. Because love once planted is irrepressible. 6 weeks after the surgery, spring arrived in the city the way children arrive in birthday rooms, loud, colorful, nearly impossible to ignore. trees along Whitmore Avenue unfurled fresh green confetti, cafe patios sprouted umbrellas, and somewhere overhead a lark tested new sheet moosey against cloudless sky. Gerald Whitmore stood on the penthouse balcony he'd once treated like an ornamental shelf for skyline views. Today he rattled a terracotta pot, a lavender plant clipped from rosewood as courtyard seedlings had outgrown its starter tray. He pressed 2 fingers into black soil roots tugged gently, alive and hungry. The feeling lit a fuse of contentment he still wanted to use to. Behind him, Elena's voice floated from the open sliding door. Board call in 10, Gerald. Do you need bullet points? Just one, he said without turning. Led with the new foundation charter. She approached, tablet in hand, expanding medial aid endowments to every hospice within the metro radius. That charter? And school libraries, he added, placing the pot on a sun-drenched table. Always libraries. Elena's mouth curved. Copy that. She hesitated. Margaret's discharge is confirmed. 3 o'clock, he said, which is why that call will last no longer than 9 minutes. Elena's brows rose in mock warning, but she left, heels tapping the cadence of a woman who enjoyed efficient miracles. Gerald looked once more at the lavender, then tapped his pocket watch. Tick 9:50 a.m. Time enough. Rosewood Hospice hadn't just survived, it had blossomed. Cement paint now wrapped the entire west wing. Generator hum replaced flickering bulbs, and the courtyard fountain sang a baritone duet with a new bird feeder Lily had rigged from recycled juice boxes. It was here, beneath a sky braided with sun, that Margaret Harper would step through the gate of recovery and into the next chapter. She'd spent 2 weeks in Memorial, a step-down unit, 3 more at a specialized rehab center. Each day added a physical feat, dangling legs, standing, 3 shaky steps. Then laps around corridors painted with motivational quotes. The bico sleeve inside her chest pulsed like a teacher's metronome, guiding muscles to remember their old dance. Nurses called her a library legend. Therapists called her walking lavender. She preferred grandma finally. Now discharge day. Grace arrived early to decorate room 18 for a well-back rest stop, bunting cut from pastel construction paper, vases of garden marigolds, and a plate of honey butter toast carefully smuggled in from Margot's at dawn. Lily supervised, clipboard in hand. She wore a new t-shirt emblazoned with a lavender sprig and the words Heart Fixer Crew. Hoots the owl, freshly laundered, perched on her shoulder via a clothespin. Quality control, Lily declared. At 2:55 p.m., a shuttle van rolled up. Gerald stepped out first, wearing khakis dusted with soil and the navy cardigan that had become his unofficial uniform. He opened the side door, extending a steady arm. Margaret emerged carefully, clutching a lightweight cane. The courtyard erupted in cheers from staff, patients, even contractors installing new benches. Margaret breathed in the scented air. Rosemary, fresh paint, early roses. Smells like a sequel, she whispered. Bestseller, Gerald corrected and guided her along the new paved path. Each footfall resounded like punctuation. Step, step, exclamation point. Inside, Lily launched herself forward, but Dr. Alvarez, who'd taken a half day to witness the milestone, intercepted. Gentle hugs, she reminded. Lily slowed, wrapping arms gently around her grandmother's waist. Still, the embrace trembled with joy. Room 18 looked less like medical real estate and more like a bed and breakfast hosted by stationery enthusiasts. Fairy lights framed the headboard. Watercolor prints of lavender fields hung in crisp white frames. The ceramic tile rested at eye level, captioned with a plaque Gerald had commissioned, planted in faith, grown in love. Margaret's eyes glistened. You kept the art. The garden's first portrait, Grace said. A nurse helped Margaret sit, vital signs steady as a hymn. Dr. Alvarez listened to her heart, smiled. Left ventricular output up to 62%. That's near normal territory. Margaret laughed softly. All those years of library shushing, my heart finally speaks up. Gerald produced a manila envelope. Speaking of libraries, Margaret opened it, a glossy brochure for the Harper Children's Reading Nook. A new wing Gerald had funded at Brookshire Elementary, set to break ground in summer. Her hand covered her mouth. You didn't. I asked the board how to best invest in future dividends, he said. They voted unanimously for story stock. She exhaled a shaky breath. I am running out of thank yes. Good, he replied. Collect them, bind a book. Celebration spilled into the courtyard where tables now sported lavender-patterned cloths. Volunteers served lemonade, lemon tart, and bite-sized shortbread that Gerald had baked at dawn with Lily. First thing she'd ever learned to cook. Though she'd eaten half the test batch, patience wheeled out. Ivy poles trailing like kite strings. Music drifted from a Bluetooth speaker. Lily's garden playlist. The same tracks that had steadied nerves on surgery morning. Track 4, a lilting violin piece titled Home in Bloom, brought hush. Lily jumped onto a low stone bench. This is the song that brings us home, she proclaimed. Arms wide, she beckoned her grandmother. Margaret rose slowly, cane in one hand, Lily's fingers in the other. They swayed no grand waltz, just side-to-side stem movements. Grace joined. Then Gerald, then Dr. Alvarez. Soon the entire courtyard looked like a field of human lavender, nodding gently to invisible wind. Phones captured the moment, but the real recording etched itself into recessed corners of hearts. Afterward, Gerald and Lily slipped away to check the original lavender bed. Plants had trebled in height, purple buds peaked like tiny lanterns. Lily knelt to weed. She asked, "Did the board behave during your 9-minute meeting?" "They did," he said. "Short meetings are their new cardio." "And the big charter change?" "Approved," he confirmed. "We're relaunching the Whitmore Harper Compassion Fund." She beamed. "Does that mean we fix more impossible things?" "It means we fix the people who try so they don't burn out." Lily brushed soil from her palms. "Grandma says burnt toast still tastes good if you add honey." He chuckled. "Wise woman." Evening descended with pink clouds shaped like imaginary continents. Margaret, tired but exhilarated, napped in room 18 while Grace filled out final home health schedules. Gerald sat by the window revising a speech for next month's philanthropy summit. First line, a 6-year-old's lavender letter taught me Roy stands for rhythm of the impossible. He tapped delete to cliché and began again. A soft knock. Lily slipped in, holding a sealed lavender wax envelope. "Found this when we unpacked Grandma's suitcase. She said it's for you." Gerald opened it. Inside, a note in Margaret's tidy script for the next child who thinks the world's too tall. Pass this on. Below the message lay her life insurance beneficiary form, now retitled to the Whitmore Harper Compassion Fund. He shook his head, overwhelmed. Lily whispered, "She says circles are better than straight lines." He smiled. "Then we keep circling." Margaret stirred. Gerald slipped the envelope into his jacket. She opened her eyes. "Last secret," she murmured. "I know," he said, "and I'll honor it." 3 months later, summer. Rosewood's courtyard resembled a living postcard, lavender in full bloom. Rosemary hedges, marigold shouting orange. The fountain had gained a small stone plaque, "Some things can't wait." Mrs. Brandt, now walking briskly without her pole, gave impromptu tours. Children from the nearby elementary school visited to read poems. Margaret Kane retired to a closet, hosted story circles under a striped canopy. Gerald attended every Wednesday, sometimes reading, sometimes just listening. He de-swapped boardroom mufflinks for rolled sleeves and discovered a knack for silly voices. He could make a hedgehog sound like a rural sheriff, a talent Lily found priceless. One July afternoon, after a raucous rendition of Charlotte's Web, Lily pulled Gerald aside. "Grandma wants to show you something." They strolled to the garden's far corner where a sapling stood, an olive tree, leaves shimmering silver green, a tag read in memory of Evelyn Whitmore, "Love grows on." Margaret was waiting, a watering jug in hand. "I thought your wife deserved roots here, too," she said. Gerald's voice cracked. "I can't find words." "Then plant quiet," she replied, guiding his hands to the jug. "Water heals." He poured slowly, soil darkening. Lily hummed home and bloom, the melody floating around leaves like a promise. Gerald felt something inside him settle, a stone he'd carried for years found soft earth at last. Late August, Whitmore Investments announced to rebrand Whitmore Wellspring, emphasizing ethical growth and community equity programs. CFO Hammond resigned, citing philosophical differences. The share price dipped, then rebounded as media hailed the company as pivot as capitalism with a conscience. Gerald gave the keynote at the philanthropy summit, this time keeping the opener simple. "I am here because a handwritten resume changed my job description from billionaire to beginner." The speech went viral. Stock footage of lavender flashed across millions of phones. Autumn's first chill arrived the day Grace closed on a modest 2-bedroom apartment near the Botanical Gardens, financed in part by a no-interest loan from the Compassion Fund. Moving day felt like a block party, Rosewood staff lugging boxes, Lily marching ahead with a potted lavender plant labeled House Guardian, Gerald assembling bookshelves with surprising competence, Margaret supervised, occasionally reading aloud from her beloved guest book preserved now in an archival box. At dusk they picnicked on the bare living room floor, cocoa, lemon cookies, grilled cheese triangles. Lily proposed a toast to rooms that become gardens and gardens that become home. Mason jar glasses blinked. Gerald stayed late, hanging fairy lights along Lily's bedroom window. She watched, arms folded. "Looks like room 18, she said. "Memory lights," he answered. "So every night ends like a story on a good page." When he finished, she hugged him, whispering, "Family." He could only nod, throat too tight. Winter tiptoed in, dusting rooftops with sugar. Rosewood held its first light up the garden festival, an idea Lily dreamt during math class. Strings of solar lanterns draped over lavender bushes, patients sipped hot cider. A children's choir sang gentle carols. Gerald arranged for a snow mansion to fluff the pathways. Lily squealed, chasing synthetic flakes. At event's end, Margaret read a new story she'd written, The Girl Who Hired a Billionaire. She changed names, but everyone recognized the red sweater, the polished floors, the pump of a previously reluctant heart. The final line read, Some jobs pay in something stronger than money. They pay in belonging. The audience applauded, some wiping tears. Gerald felt like his chest could crack from gratitude. As people dispersed, he and Margaret lingered near the fountain. Ice framed the plaque, water still running beneath. Do you ever regret the day Lily marched into your office? She asked. He chuckled, only that it didn't happen sooner. You were ready when you were ready, she said. Stories open when the chapter matters. They stood in comfortable silence until Lily ran over holding 3 sparklers. Last part of the festival. Tree Sparkle wished they lit them, sizzling lines of fire painting winter dusk. What is your wish? Gerald asked. Lily considered that every lonely person gets lavender in their mailbox. Margaret countered that libraries never run out of chairs. Gerald lifted his sparkler, that courage always finds a way, and preferably wearing yellow boots. Sparks hissed out, smoke curling upward like punctuation. Lily giggled, wishes sent. One year later, the lavender bed needed pruning, stems woody, blooms abundant. Gerald knelt beside Lily, now 9, with specialized shears. They trimmed stalks, bundled them with twine. Margaret, stronger than any rehab chart predicted, sat on a bench reading donation letters aloud. A retired mechanic funding a hospice roof in Missouri. A teenager organizing a lavender run for heart research. A corporate team painting children's wards seed mint green, circles widening. Grace arrived waving a legal envelope. Final adoption papers, she exclaimed. Lily's eyes enlarged. Gerald looked out, fingers frozen mid-ties. Adoption? Grace laughed. Of the lavender program, the city's parks department wants to replicate this courtyard template statewide. They need our sign-off. Lily exhaled dramatically. I thought you meant adopting me again. I am already adopted by the whole place. Gerald tousled her hair, and by me unofficially. She grinned. You restuck now? He resumed bundling, happily. Margaret folded the letter she'd been reading. Gerald, do you realize your company's latest quarterly report lists lavender impact as a key metric? I noticed, he said. Turns out empathy scales. She tapped her cane in mock severity. Just don't let the spreadsheets lose the scent. Brains glitch, Lily reminded. Hearts laminate. Everyone laughed. They finished tying bundles. Gerald inhaled the fragrance, so familiar yet still stunning. He remembered the trembling wax-sealed letter that had started this odyssey. Ready to harvest the song? He asked. Lily closed her eyes, humming the violin piece. Gerald joined off-key. Margaret added soft harmony. Their mixed voices rose, wove through lavender rose, brushed the fountain, drifted into hospital windows where new patients listened even if they didn't know what they heard, and felt lighter. Song ended, sun-dipped western rooftops. Gerald stood, brushing soil from knees. Home, he said quietly. Lily looked around, puzzled. We were already home. Exactly, he smiled. I just needed to say it out loud. Margaret linked arms with them both. Let us head inside. I owe tonight's story a happy beginning. They walked toward cement doors. Lavender bundles rattled like scrolls. Wind swept petals across the path, tiny purple notes in a grand staff of stone. Behind them, the fountain murmured steady accompaniment, heart monitor of the garden. And above, the first evening star flickered awake, as if signaling the next chapter, the next impossible thing waiting to be fixed by hands that now knew exactly where to start. Because the song that brings us home is simple: show up. Plant love, stay long enough to watch it bloom. The rest money. Walls fear eventually bends to the rhythm. Lavender knows, and now so do they.